Hello and welcome to the SpaceChem Tournament 2020 Round 7 video. Today I've got Biggie Mac with me.
Hello.
And brookieoz with me.
Hello.
And Zig.
Sup?
What's up? Anyhow, thank you guys for showing up. Here we go. Before we go on, I'd like to thank the tournament hosts RPO and 12345 IEEE. RPO made all the puzzles. There are a lot of fun puzzles, and thank you, RPO. And 12345 IEEE, he's the guy that's taking in our submissions and tabulating results and doing just a lot of stuff. He's really helpful. Anyhow, thank you guys. I know they'd all prefer to be playing in the tournament, but they run the tournament so we can play, and that's a nice sacrifice to make. Also, this tournament uses all the advanced features of the Community Edition. That's the kind of the overarching theme of the tournament. We should thank the Community Edition developers. That's Chaboka and again 12345 IEEE. Community Edition has really nice features. Everybody should be running it. But thank you guys. The round 7 puzzle is called ore processing, and brookieoz is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Right. So this round, essentially, IEEE and RP0 have decided to take a look further into the capabilities of customized reactors. So you might take a look at this and be like, "Oh yeah, this puzzle isn't too difficult," and it's really not. IEEE wanted to have a puzzle that is very much focused on throughput, instead of in a lot of the SpaceChem campaign missions. It is actually not too difficult in most of the production puzzles to reach maximum throughput. That is, you're using the input as soon as they come in. IEEE decided, you know what? Throughput, like max throughput, is kind of really boring because afterwards you're just optimizing for latency. But here we're actually limited to 3 reactors, and that is actually the main way of limiting processing power so that we are not able to run at maximum throughput. Now, the reactors that we actually have access to are they're very special. They're called super sensor reactors. They, unlike sensor reactors, have 4 sensors instead of 1. This allows you to do a lot of weird things. Well, they're not really weird. It's just it's kind of like you're able to get the conditional logic of a sensor reactor, but you're able to do a lot more complicated conditional logic because you're able to have so many different sensors activated on so many different X and Y conditions. Now, the special thing about super bonder reactors is that, well, in normal sensor reactors, you can only ever have 1 atom on a sensor at a time. So in the main game, I think we've covered this in a previous video, but just to refresh, having different atoms on different bonders works like a ore
condition.
Yeah. So if you had hydrogen and oxygen on 2 sensors, both the hydrogen and the oxygen sense commands would be lit up, and they would divert your Waldos accordingly.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the puzzle. Why don't you describe the inputs and the outputs?
Right. So the inputs and the outputs here are limonite, millerite, invar, and sulfuric acid. So limonite is essentially iron. It's kind of a iron ore where you've got iron just bonded to a whole bunch of oxygens and hydrogens. The special thing about this puzzle is that it's a random input, and even though every single limonite is actually the exact same number of oxygen, hydrogen, and iron, the actual orientation of each is different. This is the biggest challenge to actually solving this puzzle, because you have to take into account of conditional processing for each of these different geometries. The millerite contains your nickel and sulfur, and the puzzle is actually a 1-to-1. So one of each input makes one of each output. The main way to solve this is essentially you're just debonding all of your oxygens and moving your irons to your nickel, and then getting out the invar, and then you're bonding the rest of the oxygens to the leftover sulfur to get your sulfuric acid. So essentially, if you treat every input of limonite as a different puzzle, you essentially have kind of 3 puzzles to solve with one machine. So the question is, do you converge all of these different inputs into like a single stream of just iron and oxygen, or do you just say, okay, yeah, I know I'm just going to get random stuff, but as long as everything is isomorphic to the final output, then, it's fine, right? Well, we will see in the solutions.
But before we look at the first solution, let's just discuss the metric. This time it's a cycles optimization puzzle, trying to make the machines go as fast as possible. And the secondary objective is to, in case there's a tie, is to have the least symbols possible. The first solution's by Britboy in 18th place. He's a newcomer to the tournament. He just announced last possible minute saying, hey, can I join in? And the answer is yes. And let's go take a look at Britboy's solution. Brookie's going to explain it to us.
Yeah, so first of all, welcome for joining us on in week 8 of the SpaceChem tournament. I know it's very late in the tournament to join, but that's okay. I joined the 2017 tournament like in the last round, and that was it. It's never too late, and we always welcome more people to explore more design space. Anyhow, so Britboy has probably the he has the solution where it's essentially the most common method of solving this puzzle. He begins with taking a limonite, and essentially he breaks it down to send iron to one reactor and oxygen plus hydrogen to the other reactor. Him specifically actually sends some oxygen to the second reactor, and I want to mention that I've actually separated the solutions to many different categories based on how they handle these oxygens. So because all the oxygens and hydrogens eventually have to end up in the sulfuric acid output, the most important thing is really to see it how each of these things that bond directly to the iron is passed through the reactor. So I'm going to refer to oxygens and OH groups kind of like almost like they're the same thing. And I know it might get a little bit confusing, but this is kind of like, well, with the oxygens and the OH groups, it doesn't really matter in what configuration they're oriented around the sulfuric acid. So
yeah, it's important to note you can actually have the 2 hydroxides adjacent to each other on the sulfur, and it's totally fine.
Yeah. So that's why I focus primarily on like exactly how many oxygens go to each reactor instead of O's or OH groups. So Britboy shows one of the most common ways to solve this is to just take your limonite, break it in half, so you have Fe attached to 2 oxygens apiece, and then you disassemble one oxygen to go directly into the sulfuric acid making reactor, and then you have iron connected to the other oxygen, and that is given to your second reactor that makes the invar. If you do this, what ends up happening is all of your iron is going to the invar reactor, And the invar reactor has like this double duty of making invar from the nickel and iron, but also it has the duty of debonding the oxygen off of the iron and then passing that onto your sulfuric acid reactor. We'll see that in action.
Okay, here we go. It's the top half going in.
Yep. So BritBoy begins by essentially, there's your debond there, and then it will go and actually he processes these things kind of two at a time. But he has your he has the Fe and O, and that's going to be outputted to the invar reactor. He deposits the oxygens that he got off of it into the omega output for the sulfuric acid, and then blue is just going to come back and deposit that again.
It should be noted that this is the third type of limonite. Is that it?
Yeah.
Limonite. This is the third type that comes in first. We'll get 2 of them in a row. Then we'll get the second one, and then we'll get the first one. So we'll watch this reactor at least do 5 inputs.
Right. So the first reactor is actually the primary, like, is essentially what sets the pace for the rest of the solution for pretty much all solutions. There are a few solutions that actually aren't limited by their first reactor, but those are few.
Yeah, so it kind of depends what you're going for. So this kind of layout is very good for the later reactors because you're only sending 1 or 2 pieces out each pipe, and they're already like mostly sorted how they need to be. So the other reactors don't have to deal with the chaos, and they don't have to deal with having too many inputs coming in at once. So this is almost always with this layout, the first reactor is going to be the bottleneck, I suspect.
Right, and you can see here that you have. I see 3. Oh yeah, okay. I see the 4 sensors now. There are lots and lots of sensor use to determine exactly which input got into the reactor, and that's how the solution manages to essentially determine how to process the input.
Well, that was the third type of limonite. Here comes the second type. Let's see how this one gets processed. And there we go. There's our 2 OHs going down. We've got the one last iron and oxygen to go.
Yeah. So blue will eventually go back and pick that up, and then drop it in the psi output zone. About these solutions, there's a lot of like jiggling around of molecules, and this is something that a lot of solutions will try to avoid, primarily because every rotate will take time, and although it might not seem like very much, rotate commands they do end up adding 1 cycle per loop, and depending on how you fix your parity, it might be awkward to design the rest of your reactor.
Let's go take a look. Here's the first type of limonite coming in as the 5th input. Watch it get processed.
Yeah, another particularity of this solution is that there's a lot of pieces get scattered across the reactor, which is fine because of the liberal use of like sensors insofar as it's possible to detect them all and deal with them. But it does mean there's a lot of the Waldos moving around and picking up the pieces they left behind, which is slowing it down slightly.
Okay.
Indeed.
And always drops the iron and oxygen in this spot. And he's got 2 spots for the oxygen hydrogen. And here it goes blue dropping that one off. Second one is always dropped off here, and the first one's always dropped off there. And there we go. Let's go follow those along into the next reactor. It's right here.
Yeah. So this is the invar processing reactor. Essentially, you can see that the millerite is first disassembled, which we didn't quite see. Two of
Let's
the um,
let's get to the Millerite disassembly. It's almost there. There we go.
yeah, there you go. So this is going to get disassembled. The oxygens are going to get inputted, and it's going to be bonded to make sulfur dioxide, actually. And meanwhile, it's doing a big song and dance to uh, make sure that it's not bonding to any of the irons, and eventually Red will come over and make the invar.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of shuffling.
Here's our invar. And let's go follow this SO2 rat. Let's go find it. Let's go into reactor 3. Here we go. We got a convenient time here.
All right, so this reactor is just going to be inputting the hydroxyl groups and rotating them if necessary, and then waiting for the sulfur dioxide, and that's just going to get bonded in a single pass to make the sulfuric acid, and Red's just going to drop an output.
Just gonna watch that one more time. And there it is. Boom.
Of note, in that third reactor, it might be possible to turn blue into a line instead of a square, just for the sake of knowing that the trick is possible.
In
Turn the sync arrow backwards.
In fact, it's just all this needs to do. It just does input beta. I've just replaced this with an input beta, and everything was fine. No need for blue at all. But
I guess, yeah, because the previous reactors are not too quick.
Right.
Actually, yeah, because presumably there was previously some activity on blue that was necessary, but is no longer necessary.
In my notes, I said that if Reactor 1 was made faster, the whole machine would be made faster. Reactor 1 is definitely the limiter here.
Yeah, I think especially the fact that the pieces are dropped so close to the input zones when it's broken up, that means that the Waldos have to do a lot of backtracking. So focusing on maybe dropping everything over the output zones would probably speed it up.
Okay.
Right. So one of the primary principles of cycle optimization that SpaceChem doesn't tell you is assemble over the inputs, disassemble over the outputs.
Yes, it's a good golden rule.
Yes, it's a very good golden rule. I think it was first coined by Guava Moment in like his tutorials for cycle optimization back in 2012.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's in one of his very old tournament videos. But anyhow,
it's one of the SpaceChem 10 commandments, along with covet thy neighbor's score.
Okay, well, let's go watch this thing run to completion. And
yeah, so the primary reason for that is with disassembly, it is very, very efficient to go bond minus and then not have to move the output into the output zone, but instead just bond minus and then output immediately. It saves a lot of grab drops, and that does indeed make a huge difference in the end.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll see that in some of the later solutions, I believe.
Now let's let it go to completion. Britboy gets 18th place with a cycle count of 4,390, with a metric of 4,390. All of the metrics will be the same as the cycle count. That gives him a score of 1.287, and that's his first puzzle in the SpaceChem tournament. Nice job,
also, it's worth noting, I think he solved this in a few hours before the deadline.
Oh yeah,
so it's impressive that he managed to sling out 200 symbols like that in that short a time.
Totally.
Indeed.
Yeah, well done, Britboy, and welcome to the family. In 17th place is Astronelson. He has this solution, and Zig's going to explain this to us. Go ahead, Zig.
So, yeah, this is a pretty common layout. So in Reactor 1, he's going to do is he's going to try and get all of the oxygens into the same spot, and it doesn't much matter where the hydrogens end up, and then all the irons in another spot, or all the irons in the same spot but coming in after the oxygens, I should say.
Well, let's go see it.
So how he does this is he's got a 3-count loop there. That's a 3-count flip-flop, and he's just going to do blind debonds to get them all detached.
There's a 3-count.
And red is just handing over to blue here.
A nice handoff too.
And yeah, the blind 3-loop, even though it's only detaching 2 oxygens, is so that it can handle all the possible sides that the oxygens could be on.
Okay, here's the second of the type 3 limonite coming through.
And yeah, this is pretty much one of the most agnostic ways of dealing with these random inputs, as in you don't really care what you're holding, you just kind of, they're all structured such that they have a couple of oxygens on each side, as long as he's careful about where he breaks it in half.
Okay. And here comes the second type of limonite coming through. Red's got it all split up. Let's see how this gets broken up. And there's nothing there, but here it gets one side. The other side, there's the iron going out. And
also, of definite note is the fun reactor notes in the bottom. What that's supposed to read is, I believe, slices of limonite ore, hack with nanoscale knife, send on reaction orbs.
Yes, send on reaction orbs. Yes, you did. It's really funny.
Yeah, I really like that.
I did too.
That's the highlight of using just the one pipe, is that you get to use the other one for the reactor notes.
Okay, here comes the first type of limonite, and let's see how it gets handled. The bottom half is very similar to everything else. Is the top half
the
is
top
similar?
Half is opposite.
Yeah.
So that and I think one of the previous ones is oriented slightly offset, is why it needs to be 3 loops instead of 2.
Right. Now, what are these sensors here about? This is all to grab them.
So, yeah, one of them, the first one is just to double back and pick up the second oxygen. That could probably be a flip-flop, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is just to get a better grab. So I think in one of the cases.
Yeah, I think you grab and then drop and then grab. There's some logic for one of the limonite forms.
Yeah. Actually.
Okay. There's that. Let's go take a look at reactor 2.
So yeah, in the second reactor, let's see. Basically, it standardizes the orientations of. So you see all these little rotates it does with detect hydrogen and rotate if necessary. That's just to standardize the orientation that the hydroxides go out, because otherwise, I think in his third reactor they're going to collide with something. But for the most part, it's just ferrying the oxygens over again and creating the invar piece by detaching the irons and bonding them onto sulfur, or onto nickel, I should say.
Here's the invar piece coming in at the very start. That's a hydrogen getting, hydrogen getting jointed.
So R1 was pretty clean, but it did pay somewhat of a price here, because it sent lots of small pieces out a single pipe, which means that the second reactor is going to be its bottleneck, because it has to ferry all of these small pieces over. Which is just going to mean a lot of loops compared to the other reactors. But the invar piece gets made without too much trouble here. So.
Okay. Now, is invar a real thing there, Brookie?
Yeah, I don't know what the story on invar's name is.
Invar is actually a very interesting material. It's an alloy of iron and nickel. And the reason why it's called invar is because it has a very low coefficient of thermal expansion. Now,
that must be useful for something.
Yes, so it was actually invented like sometime in like the 1800s or early 1900s. I don't remember exactly when, and it was used for a lot of like scientific instruments that were especially sensitive to changes in temperature, because like say if you were trying to measure like I don't know, say distance, and your your meter stick, or I guess yardstick in American terms, is constantly like changing lengths because of the different temperatures. Well, that's not very good, right? Um, and similarly, like it was essentially an alloy used to make precision scientific instruments.
Hmm.
The reason why Invar has a low coefficient of thermal expansion is actually not really well known at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like some kind of quantum effect, but nobody
Chemistry is
actually
hard.
knows.
Yeah.
Nobody actually knows exactly how exactly it works, and if you can find the answer to that, who knows? You might get a prize. I don't. The invention of Invar was actually the guy who invented Invar actually received a Nobel Prize because it allowed a lot of advancement in scientific instruments. Who knows? Maybe if you figure out why Invar has such a low coefficient of thermal expansion, you might also get a Nobel Prize.
That's really interesting. That's good.
One last note. I was just gonna say it's actually funny. He's run out of sensors in this reactor too. That blue sink is just because he can't detect the second iron, I believe.
Wow.
I do want to
They're wrong.
say.
Actually, maybe it's not a bonder.
I do want to say that it is. I don't. It is unlikely that Astronelson actually needed both of the hydrogen sensors for each of the rotates to get the OHs in exactly that orientation each time. Depending on how he designed the third reactor, it is probably possible to end up rotating a
Yeah, maybe.
single
It would
time.
definitely be worth it.
Yeah, and then you attach the oxygens on like either like the top or the bottom instead. But we'll see.
Let's go take a look at that
Well,
third reactor. Oh,
Yeah,
more?
it's just funny that we've upgraded to 4 sensors and people are still running out of sensors. Yeah, blue could be wall stalling on a sensor there, but it has to use a sink because all the other sensors are taken.
It'd be interesting for there to be a puzzle where you have like 70 sensors and and you have to navigate around huge molecules for the conditional logic.
I don't think you would want to have 70 sensors. You'd have to pick where you don't put your sensor.
That's the challenge. That's the whole point.
Right. Anyway, yeah, let's take a look at the third reactor. So this one's pretty clean and simple because the previous reactors have done all sorts of standardization. So this one just does a loop until it detects that it's got all 4 oxygens and makes sure it's doing double bonds with the assistance of a bond stall on blue.
Oh, I think I see why he wasn't able to do that. Yeah, that rotate. I think that might be a little bit too close to the wall, and he might end up smashing a hydrogen into the wall. Oh, no, it isn't.
It depends on what
not.
time they come in, because the hydrogen will stick off in a different direction, so you wouldn't know where to drop it.
Right, but it's the
if it's a 4x3.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah,
that's
anyway,
unfortunate.
Yeah, his third reactor is obviously not the bottleneck because it's just doing very small and clean.
Yeah, his bottleneck is actually the second reactor. His first reactor actually stalls on the output. So if something like blue was doing some of the OH sensing to correct that in this reactor instead of the second reactor, it could have been sped up.
Yeah, probably. Also, clean up your sensors. He's got sensors lying all over the reactor. There's only one of them is actually being used.
Yeah, but he makes some observation in here. Who wants to read that for us?
Oh, yes, right. Solution pace is as of molasses. I loved that.
Yeah, that was really funny. Thank you, Astronelson, for entertaining us.
Yeah, thank you for the extra reactor notes. I love that.
And which is a slow reactor? It looks like number 2 is a slow reactor in the group.
Yeah, just having to handle that many inputs is problematic if you're not just bonding them in place.
And let's run it to completion. And slow as molasses indeed. 2,903 cycles gives Astronelson a 17th place and a score of 2.064, which is nearly a point better than the previous solution, actually 3/4 of a point. Let's go take a look at the sidebar for that, because big and little jumps are kind of interesting. So the previous sidebar, he had a metric Astronelson 2903, and Britboy is 4390. That's a huge jump. Next solution's by RPO. He's our tournament director, and he made this puzzle, so he gets no score for solving it. Let's go take a look at how it works. First of all, Reactor 1. He's going to take, now he seemed to address the inputs in the order that they came out, and as you can see, the third type of limonite gets handled very simply. He puts out the, first of all the limonites have a hydrogen and oxygen on the bottom that can be sliced off with just removing this one bond. So he's going to do that with these two bonders, and bye-bye. And the second one is going to go in the upper spot, and bye-bye. And he breaks the bond there, and this one goes out. Excuse me, that one goes out. And here goes the other one. Let's watch that one more time. Here's that type 3 limonite coming through. And coming up, type 2 limonite. Once again, we're going to slice off that bottom one. And he recognizes this one with this hydrogen sensor. And red takes that turn. And there's our extra hydrogen oxygen going to be sliced off. Rotating it around, he'll get, blue helps moving it around into spot, while red rotates and drops off the other one. So let's go watch that one more time. The type 2 limonite coming through. Rotate. All the iron and oxygen gets put into this spot. And here comes the type 1 limonite. This one has the pair of bonds there that I found problematic too. First of all, we get rid of that.
As a general rule, the first input seemed to be the exception in many solutions. It's maybe the most problematic to deal with because of all those bonds in the middle.
Right. But he slices off his oxygen hydrogen there. He senses, and he goes around. There's the other one. Now we've got our oxygen, iron, and now it's in the right spot for the wrong orientation, so red's going to take it away.
Oh, they both grabbed them, huh?
Yeah.
Doing a ballet there.
Yeah, indeed. And there they go.
Look at that speed, I want to see that. I was going to say the third input types dance.
Well, let's go take a look for that. Here it comes.
Here.
Okay.
All right, maybe it's less of a dance than I thought, but very nice.
And we saw some.
Yeah, I think it's a common pattern to optimize for the first one that appears, right?
Right. Okay, here we are at the start. The second reactor takes the millerite and first grabs the nickel and drops it off here, and then makes a pinwheel, if you will, or half pinwheel of the hydrogen, the OHs, and the sulfur. So there's one half, here's the other half, gets output. Very simple reactor. Oh yeah, there's because the oxygen and hydrogen come in either this orientation or that orientation, and he wants to correct it. We'll see here, he's just going to go here, rotate it twice, and attach it. Rotate it again, and attach it there. Most of the time that's not necessary, but oh well, there's two in a row.
Yeah, it's a good example of like sharing the sorting across all the reactors, not just R1.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go take a look at Reactor 3, which, as you can already see now, is the bottleneck. Let's go see if we can get to the beginning. Here's dropping off the sulfuric acid. Red comes in, inputs the nickel, inputs the iron and oxygen, and Nickel and iron are going to get bonded into our invar piece right away. And then these oxygens, which have been stowed away on the side, get put into place and double bonded to the oxygens, to our sulfur pinwheel, if you will. Here's our sulfuric acid. Let's watch this one more time. This oxygen sensor is just to make sure that you don't put one oxygen on top of the other. It could have just as well been a flip-flop. I have no idea what this wall flip-flop is to do.
It looks like it's a stall for...
But he stalls in a
Oh,
sink.
it's a sink, yeah. I don't know. Maybe in some cases he collided with someone.
I'm sure it's a remnant of an earlier design or
Yeah.
something. It's not necessary.
It looks like the issue with the third reactor is he's doing a lot of shuffling of individual oxygens, and
Yes.
maybe he could just leave those in place and pull the irons down instead of pulling the oxygens up.
Mm-hmm.
Because as is, he has to move them out of the way because the bonders are also are all on top of the
He's doing
iron
this.
oxygen piece.
He's also doing the assembly over the input zone. Isn't the rule of thumb to do it over the output zone?
Yeah, that is good. But oh wait, sorry. Assembly over the input zone is correct because then you get to pick up and move them all at once.
Okay.
But just the fact that he has to take both of those oxygens and move them out of the way, and he still has to move. He still has to do a fair amount of work with the irons anyway. He might as well be moving the irons and leaving the oxygens in place, I think.
Okay. Maybe. In any case, here we are. Reactor 3 is clearly our bottleneck. And let it run to completion. 1792 cycles. Gives RPO no score because, yes, he's our tournament director. Thank you, RPO. This was a really interesting puzzle. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
Next solutions by Bavarium, and brookieoz is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Right. So bavarium here has essentially the same physical idea as BritBoy, and very similar to RPO, where he essentially is taking the inputs and disassembling the oxygens, and again he is passing 2 oxygens to the invar reactor and 2 oxygens directly to the sulfuric acid reactor. Bavarium, however, does this more efficiently, primarily by taking advantage of the split or debond over the outputs principle that we mentioned a little earlier. So his reactor 1, at least, runs quite a bit faster, and you can see that there are sensors used to special case out for the specifics of the each of the inputs.
So here he's detecting the invar type, the limonite type 2 with a hydrogen sensor here.
Yep. So that's actually one of the primary sensing points for limonite 2 is there's that hydrogen, right up there, and that's not present on any of the other limonites.
Now here he's sensing the type 1 limonite with the oxygen over here.
Yep.
That's right.
Limonite 1 is actually, I think it's probably the hurdle for most solutions out there.
Yeah.
Primarily because there's one more bond in that limonite than the others, actually. Because if you look closely at the oxygens and the irons in the center, that one actually forms a box. And
it's a bit awkward to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, you have to like debond once more, and that messes up a lot of usually messes up a lot of like previous algorithms that you've designed when designing.
And it's also its bottom hydroxide is also pointing the opposite way, which doesn't help. But
yeah, well,
yeah, a lot of the others have something like that, but that one's got the box and that.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of them, the solutions I noticed, took advantage of the fact that the irons are all in the exact same spots.
Yeah, for sure. Finding like the symmetries between the inputs is really important.
Okay. Well, that's his reactor 1. Let's look at his reactor 2. Yeah, here we go. And let's see if we can find the start. In fact, let's just start all over. And where is blue?
It's a lot of grab drops. I'm scared.
Oops. Okay.
Yeah, the what is it? The Millerite processing sometimes isn't actually all that straightforward as you think. Especially since for the sulfuric acid, you do eventually have to end up using like all 4 signs. The best you can theoretically do is, take Millerite and bond the sulfur in that to 3 other oxygens, and then you have to process the nickel somehow.
Yeah, since you don't have enough bonders. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough sides.
you can't bond to 4 oxygens at once is all.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you could by taking Millerite and just splitting it so you can do input bond in the next reactor, but well, we'll see. We'll see in future solutions.
Also, it seems like there's one every video, but you're gonna have to call out the arrow on the right side on top of the grab drop on red.
Oh gosh.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Nice catch.
Okay, well.
But even more importantly than that, label your grab drops so I can read this. some of these are just grabs and drops.
Yeah, I prefer that. Some people don't.
Just wait until you get to the bonus solutions. There's some pretty nasty things in those reactors.
Yeah, but at least those are on purpose, right?
I mean, yeah, but if you're trying to like sight read, like, oh, yeah,
he also does
lots and lots of sensors.
It's fairly straightforward, but he didn't put an annotation for his sulfur with 2 oxygens. Would have been nice.
Iron oxide annotation actually is in the wrong place, but
yeah. Oh well.
That must have been from a previous iteration.
Yeah, let's go take a look. It looks like reactor 1 is going a little faster than either reactors 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at reactor 3. Oh, good timing.
It's a single wall though.
Actually, it's
kind of strange. Or yeah, it's a hammer. But that's only one step away from a single Waldo. That is interesting. You don't usually see many single Waldo solutions in cycles puzzles.
Okay. Here's our sulfuric acid going out.
Oh, and it looks like the hydroxyl radical actually can appear in 2 places. He has to do a blind grab there.
Yes.
On the very left side, it has to.
There's one here, one grab there.
Potentially drag it downwards, but sometimes it appears in the right spot.
That's right.
That's why that.
Oh, and it has to detect if it's So there's a few different spots the hydroxyls can appear, so it does some handling. Oh, it's pretty unfortunate. It has to go all the way around the loop there.
Right.
The little 6 loop there is in the way.
Right. And this time it doesn't need to. It just grabs and goes. He also has this sensor here to detect when the oxygen needs to get dropped up here.
If it's in the wrong shape or something.
Right, let's go take a look. Wait for that one thing to get triggered.
You could probably throw a pause on it. That'd be faster.
There it is.
Oh no, there it is. Yeah.
And it's grabbed by the wrong corner. So there you go.
Right, just needs to drop a bit higher up.
And same issue.
So is the second or the third reactor the bottleneck here?
Let's go take a look.
It's the second reactor, because the third one installs on the beta input for the second reactor.
Right.
Oh yeah, and it's got the pipe squiggles too. or the third reactor is the one that needs to delay its pipe.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's watch it go to completion. Here we are. Bavarium gets 1,763 cycles. It gives him a score of 3.440, or a big 1.376 better. Let's go take a look at it. Bavarium has a metric of 1763, and the previous solution was RPO.
I think RP0 wasn't counted in the
No, it wasn't.
previous jump, yeah.
Yeah. 2903 from Astronelson. So Bavarium gets a huge jump for really having a big jump in metric. Nice job, Bavarium. Next solution is by Noeuchar in 15th place. Let's go take a look at it. Okay, his reactor 1 splits up the limonite into either one of two shapes, always with the iron in the bottom right corner here, but sometimes it's a square like this.
I think that's the last hydrogen it's representing.
Well, we'll take a look at
It's got
it in a
the
moment.
question mark, so he's saying it could be bonded one of two ways.
Yes, it can be either up
or
or down.
It could have.
We'll look at it in a moment. This one's this first piece going out is like this, without the upper bond that is actually shown incorrectly in the annotation. This is one way that the second input or second output is shaped. So here comes millerite type 3 again.
Yeah, this is limonite.
Limonite, thank you. I always get names confused. Here we go. And blue drops that one off. Now here's number 2, limonite number 2 coming through. And it's just shaped fine. At least the bottom half is. And the top half, I'm getting my tops and bottoms confused. Okay, here, there was, blue was handling the top. And
yeah, this is a good output sorting because the oxygens are at least on the same sides. So even if the hydrogens are in funky places, that shouldn't matter too much.
Now here's the first type of limonite coming through. And this is, as we know, is the hard one.
And he has to go up now. Okay. He has to wait for the first one to be done.
And there's our first one. And second one, second half. Here we go. Okay. Let's go follow them through. But first, we get a trivial second reactor here. This is just separating the nickel and the sulfur, putting them in the exact same spot. Not much to it. It's a single Waldo. This could have been done differently with blue, with the Waldo colors reversed, and then in that case, red would be hammering a bond minus, and you could just make a simple square that way. It's not important. As you can see later, this is not the limiting reactor. Buildup is coming in the reactor 3, which we'll look at now. Okay, and let's get the sulfuric acid out and the invar piece out. Okay, here we go. We're at the beginning. Red is inputting the nickel first, and blue's going to grab that sulfur. Red's in charge of taking that iron off, while blue's going to take that corner of the sulfuric acid out. Red bonds, unbonds, and grabs the invar piece, and blue, meanwhile, fills in the other two corners of the sulfuric acid.
Yeah, so there's no conditional logic here, which is nice because the first reactor did it all for them. But that is this the bottleneck or the first reactor?
This is the bottleneck.
Okay.
This is the case where the oxygen and hydrogen are pointing down instead of up. As you can see, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I'm
so I guess
surprised because he uses he does this by bond limit to extract the iron and nickel.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. Yeah, because
Oh
gets
yeah,
the
sure.
the
he
nickel and
knows the
iron up
oxygens
to
will only go to
triple
2, and the
bond.
iron will go to 3. So he goes up to 3 and 2, and then debonds down to 1 and 0. That's fine.
Ah, nice.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
There's,
he probably could have made better use of that second reactor because he actually got rid of basically all the randomness in the first reactor, as evidenced by him not needing any sensors here.
right.
And this reactor is actually still the bottleneck, in spite of the fact that Reactor 1 did all that work to get rid of the chaos.
Right. So Reactor 2, the thing that processes the millerite, is definitely severely underloaded.
Yeah.
This is kind of like a concept that I was thinking of, like talking about sometime earlier in Mundanifier, actually, where for puzzles where especially cycles puzzles where maximum throughput is not really possible. One good rule of thumb is kind of trying to figure out like um, how to distribute the work across all your reactors in
Evenly.
a relatively even way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this you can see um, while reactor 1 and 3, which is the limonite input and the output reactor, are working pretty much full time, reactor 2 has a lot of downtime.
Yeah, so
And
maybe Reactor 3 does like 2 loops, kind of, to get that, to first create sulfur dioxide and then create sulfur, I don't know, quadroxide. Maybe that first loop could have been in the second reactor, and the third reactor just does the extra swap. Something like that.
perhaps, yeah. I mean, there's also the possibility of, having the first reactor give half of the iron and 2 oxygen things, like the first half the limonite to like the next reactor, and then the other half limonite will bypass that reactor and go
Yeah,
directly to the
that would
last one.
require an entirely different pipe layout. But
Right.
yeah,
Unfortunately, that essentially is like a completely different approach, but anyhow.
usually I find most of these like solutions are dictated by their first reactor. So yeah, it is a bit
Right.
it is a bit unfortunate that the first reactor does all this work to get rid of the randomness and then is still not the bottleneck.
Well, let's just
So he has
see.
a reasonably efficient first reactor for that sorting into the same pipe.
Yeah, despite its complaints, I really did like the this loop in here and how it behaves.
Yeah, it does look nice too.
But here we go. Noeuchar clocks in at 1,236 cycles, giving him a score of 4.924, or almost 1.5 points better than the predecessor. Let's just see, 1236 versus
17 something.
1763.
Yeah,
big jump there. Next solution is in 14th place by blueeyedrat, and let's go see how it's done.
Yeah, so before you just go through the solution reactor by reactor, you might notice that there is a feedback pipe in the solution,
oh my.
which gives me some nasty memories. But
You're gonna have
that's
to be more
actually
specific.
never used.
There are lots of nasty feedback loops in SpaceChem.
Yeah, feedback
Nasty
loops
memories of feedback loops.
can have there's a lot of applications for feedback loops, none of which are very fun to go through.
Probably varies by person, but so how's he using the feedback loop here?
He's actually not. It's there just for aesthetics. So
What?
yeah, thanks for giving me a trigger.
Let's dive into Reactor 1.
Yeah. So it's gonna be your standard disassembly, and blueeyedrat actually does really efficient disassembly, where he is again splitting into 2 oxygens going to the sulfuric acid reactor, and 2 irons and 2 oxygens going into the invar reactor. Now, actually, I think this is the first solution. Correct me if I'm wrong. that actually doesn't have a consistent, like he doesn't consistently keep track of exactly which oxygen and hydrogen goes where. Like sometimes he'll have O's going into the invar reactor instead of OHs, and vice versa.
Ah, yes, right.
Okay.
Yeah, the usual hydroxide agnosticity. This is what, a 21 cycle main loop here, something like that, 20 or 21, depending on which input it is.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm looking at blue, but the problem is
I think red's easier to look at, but yeah.
Blue waits on the sink, so it's going to be dictated by red. So yeah.
But yeah, it looks like 20 or 21. Anyway, but yeah, it's splitting 2 oxygens down and 2 oxygens/irons up.
Okay. Let's dive in and look at reactor 2.
Yeah. So reactor 2 actually. Yes, you can see the big stick already.
I love big sticks.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Let's wait for red to get to its start. Here, red's getting to its start.
Yeah, so this is actually a double pumped reactor.
Double pump big stick reactor?
Yes.
Let's go.
You've got the input, and the input from the first reactor is actually staggered so that he's able to use just a single pair of bonders to bond on the 2 opposite sides of. Yeah, that's actually
that's clever use of the.
He gets to do that without doing 2 rotates, which would have cost him more time. Yeah, this is something you'll also see in other solutions. And you can see here that there's the aforementioned hydroxyl agnosticism, where the reactor doesn't actually really care if there are hydroxide groups attached to the ends or not. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's go take a look at the third reactor.
So apparently this reactor is the bottleneck.
Yeah, I see moving single moving single oxygens down, which is usually indicative.
It is unfortunate.
Having to pick them all up manually, yeah. So it's the one small issue with the splitting the multiple oxygens into one pipe like that.
It's double pump too. So yeah, because if you were saying 22 cycles per input on average, then it would your expected score would be 880 plus latency, and blueeyedrat is almost like 300 cycles over that. So
okay, let's watch it go.
Yeah, the issue is that the sulfur isn't already pre-attached to any of the oxygens, so he has to attach in one zone and then move the other ones down to the other zone. If they were pre-attached from either of the inputs to the sulfur, then the other oxygens could just be attached in one go by putting the bonders in the right spot.
I wonder if he could have saved time by adding 2 more cycles to the first reactor and moving everything down by 1 tile.
Yeah, probably. Maybe.
Oh, no,
I'm not sure how balanced they are.
He can't because it'll collide with the bottom of the reactor.
Right.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and we can.
I'll run that second reactor at speed. I'm sure everyone would like to see that. I would at least.
It's like a giant propeller.
Yeah. So the reason you need to speed up that third reactor bottleneck is not to make your solution faster. It's so that this flipping over will be more satisfying without the pauses.
Okay, let's go take a look at this thing finish up. It's not much more. And this gives blueeyedrat a cycle count of 1135 and a score of 5.449 in 14th place. Gets a little better than half a point of jump from his predecessor. And that's blueeyedrat's solution. Next solution's by Team Random Element, which is me and Chaboka. Chaboka is one of the 2 developers of the Community Edition. Anyhow, before we go on and dive into this solution, I've got to point out that there is in fact a feedback loop. Reactor 1 outputs to reactor 2, which outputs back to reactor 1. We'll see how that works. We're going to go back and forth between reactors 1 and 2 just to see how this works. Here, let's go into reactor 1. Now, even before I can start reactor 1, I have to show that there's a initialization code. It really helped with this feedback loop to get this pipe full of some elements before one was ready to take the feedback from number 1. So we had to have initialization code to load up that pipe.
Oh.
So blue's gonna go along this path and back, and then dive into its main loop. Meanwhile, red's gonna go here, go around, do it a second pass, go around, and up, and now it's ready to enter its main loop. So we'll see that work. It's a little complicated. Boy, I wish we hadn't made it so complicated, but this is what occurred to us. Now the key thing, forget about any annotations you see. We had 6 elements we had to describe, and we only have 3 annotation slots, so we had problems. The key thing for our outputs is we wanted to have the iron land here, and we wanted to be able to be dragged down on a D-bond in reactor 2. So this position for the upper half is good, but that wouldn't have been good for the second half. So red's going to rotate it, bring it down, and drop it there where the iron's still here and can be dragged down. Let's go watch that again. And red's going to come in and do the helping and bring it down. Now here we get limonite number 2, and blue's going to handle this mostly by itself. So blue's dropped this piece, the upper piece. The upper piece never really needs any help. It's the lower pieces that need help. And blue's going to drop it there and pick it up here and rotate it around. And there is the iron in a favorable spot, so it can be dragged down. Now, we're going to ignore this portion in a minute. We'll look back to it. Let's go take a look at now, there is our invar piece coming out, but we'll view that again in a minute because I really want to focus on this loop that red makes. And is it this one? Here is, no, this isn't the one. Blue handles this one by itself. I believe it's the next input, which is the limonite type 3 rather. Nope, wrong one. Here's limonite type 1, or type 3 rather. And this is when red comes in, jumps up, grabs, rotates, and drops in the favorable position. Now we can go into our reactor number 2. Here's reactor number 2, and we'll wait until we get to the very beginning. Okay, blue's going to grab that the millerite, and it's going to drop the sulfur right here after a D-bond. And it's
so
going to
place.
Right. It's going to drop the nickel right here, and it's going to sail up here. And it's red. We used to have a loop that was just a square, and we found this was the limiting reactor. So we cut that loop in half, and red's going to drop the iron here, and blue's going to carry it to the final destination. So
little assist move.
Yeah, and hits a perfect handoff here. Boom. And blue goes there and drops it off. And here's red coming down, and blue's too far away, so red had to drop it off here on its own. We have a nickel, iron, and iron. At least these annotations are correct. So let's go watch. Red's going to be able to drag that iron down, and that's the big plan. Is this iron has to be in a position that can be dragged straight down after the D-bond. And now we have 3 types of inputs. We have 3 types of shapes, and in reactor 3 you'll find, yes, 3 different kinds of conditional handling. So let's go to reactor 3 now. And I'm going to restart the whole thing because it helps that I know the input order. So here we go. First thing coming in for reactor 3 is going to be the sulfur. And then we're going to get our hydrogen and oxygen. Now, this is fine. We want them in the oxygens in here, but we want the hydrogens either here and here or something akin to that. And this one's fine. But when we come back into the second half, oh no. That hydrogen there would collide with that one if it wasn't fixed. So blue could come around and fix that up. There you go, red. And there's our sulfuric acid. And let's go watch that one more time.
I suppose a hydrogen sometimes comes in the top right too.
Yes.
It wasn't possible to have the sulfur attached from bonder number 2 instead of bonder number 3, maybe?
Well, let's go take a look, because the next one's the type you're talking about. This one's our, quote,
Right.
normal case.
Yeah.
And here the hydrogen's coming in up there. So there's no hydrogen sensor being triggered here, nothing to flip around, and blue's going to go around. Now, this one input type is going to be repeated. Now, the next ones are type 1 limerite, limerite, yes. And it has problems on the first one. So, we're going to get 2 oxygens here. And they really need to be oxygen here and oxygen here. So blue's going to come in and give the assist. There you go, red.
So red is pretty much, just blindly doing the same thing, and blue's doing all of the supporting of handling the chaos.
Right. And there you go. Those are the 3 types. The 3 special cases. A normal case, a blue got to fix that one, and a blue got to fix this one.
And it looks like you have a... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it looks like you have a output on blue in the bottom left. I assume that's for the 40th output only?
Actually, yes and no. It used to be that way, but we'll take a look in a minute. Let's go out of the reactor. We really didn't have a bottleneck, per se. I mean, there was a lot of times when number 2 was our bottleneck. It now looks like this iron input is our bottleneck, but actually this is a favorable thing. As you can see, red doesn't input a sink here waiting for blue to catch up, because red's got the 2 pieces. It's going to bond them, grab them, and it's going to do an input bond to get the third one. If the iron wasn't coming up reliably, we wouldn't be able to do that. And in fact, there was a time when it wasn't coming in reliably, and we had spammed a bunch of bond plus, bond plus, bond plus, and we got it to work just through blind. It was quite funny. That's why our solution was called science, because, well, it was amusing. So it's okay, in our opinions, to have this backup appear. But as you can see, at one point in the cycle, our sulfuric acid comes after our invar piece, and at this point it comes before. And so in our 40th case, let's go a little faster. In our 40th case, I said in our 40th case, okay, here's our sulfuric acid, our final one coming out. Here's our final invar piece coming out, and we'll end up there with a cycle count of 1116, which is very good because we had solutions until the final day that were 1135, and we would have lost that tiebreaker. We had one that was 1134, but 1116 was really good for us. We were very happy with that. That gave us 13th place and a score of 5.651. That was 0.202 better. Let's go take a look at sidebar time. 1135, well, I've already explained that. 1135 versus 1116. Really close.
We had any ties this round?
No, we did not have any ties.
Okay.
So metric 2 is really kind of unimportant, but speaking of metric 2, in full disclosure land, we did figure out a way to...
But that was dead.
Yeah, we did figure out a way to save ourselves a few symbols.
After the fact, yeah.
And we... there we go. And this one isn't really needed anymore. And we're now at 170 symbols instead of 172. And it works just the same. We figured that out before the submission time, but we just bugged IEEE a lot of times during the last hour. And we didn't have the guts to bug him some more. And so,
Just for a symbol save. You took
yeah,
the risk.
we took a risk, is right.
That someone would get exactly a 1116-171 submission.
Yeah, no, we weren't. It was savings of 2 symbols, not 1. But we weren't going to bug him for that. And so, here we are, 1116. I personally like to thank Chaboka. We had a lot of fun with this puzzle. We had the only true feedback loop solution. We settled on it early on the solution space, and we really didn't figure out another way. And it's not always easy being unique. Wish we'd figured something else out, but this is what we did, and I personally like it. In 12th place, we have Counterpoint solution, and let's go take a look at it now.
So Counterpoint does a common method, which is the iron dioxide out of the first reactor, and uses reactor 1 just to make that pretty standardized how it comes out. So you can actually see that all 3 of its reactor notes are iron dioxide with that same orientation. I'm not sure why he chose to make 3 separate reactor notes if he wasn't going to point out where the hydrogens were, but in any case. Yeah, you can see it always cuts every piece in half, just with that line debonding, and then red does some special handling to pick up the second piece properly. And a few rotates are also used on, or a rotate is used on blue to fix it if it's pointing the wrong way. So then the auctions are always on the same side, which is going to make reactor 2 and 3's jobs a lot easier.
Now, how's he going to handle that type 1 number? Let's go take a look at that.
Yeah, I think that's the double debond, and then red has to do something funky here. Yeah, that's debond and then rebond. That's cute.
How did he sense that he had that piece type?
That was I believe the hydrogen sensor.
Let's take a look. Here it is.
Because it's when blue's got that hydrogen stick out on the bottom right. I think red, or where's the sensor? Oh no, it's in the top left. Yeah, that's right. Because the top left corner.
Okay.
It only gets cut in that spot if it's got both those bonds in the box in the middle. So the top left hydrogen can be used to detect it in that case.
Nice. Let's go take a look at number 2 reactor.
So yeah, now reactor 2's got this beautiful boon of iron dioxide coming in nicely standardized, so it takes it and outputs the auctions in a nice clean spot and then attaches to the invar. And blue actually has to do a double back here to handle everything. So that's why it has a flip-flop, and red just has one larger loop.
Okay.
Actually, they hand off to each other to make this efficient, because basically there's 3 inputs to deal with and only 2 Waldos, which is why this construct of having the Waldos hand off to each other to kind of make them 2, each of them is kind of handling 1.5 molecules, is why that's efficient.
Nice.
And so now this has conveniently placed all the oxygens and the sulfur in the correct arrangement for the next reactor.
Oh.
So the next reactor will do something we've seen before, which is input everything, bond them, and then grab the next pair of oxygens after doing a few rotates. So this is the same as in Rex and Chaboka's solution.
Nice.
But with a slightly different layout.
And he doesn't need to have the saves that we had to have.
So yeah, in this solution, Reactor 2 was pretty efficient about how it handled the 3 inputs that it had to deal with, but because of the fact that it had to deal with so many inputs, it was in fact still the bottleneck. This Reactor 3 is very clean, and Reactor 1 is sufficiently makes good use of the 2 Waldos to sort things. So
Okay.
I believe Reactor 2 is back up.
Okay.
So that's the catch of putting everything into one pipe, even when they're not all detached.
And anything you want to look at closer? Should we run at full speed now?
I think we could run this at full speed.
Here we go. And this gives Counterpoint a cycle count of 1084 for 12th place, and a score of 5.918, and an improvement of 0.267 over us. Me and Chaboka, random element. Nice job, Counterpoint. In 11th place, we have JoJo, and he has this solution.
Yeah, so this is the first of a few solutions we're going to see which take the first reactor and they use it to split completely oxygen, hydrogen into one pipe, iron into the other. And in JoJo's case specifically, the annotations that include sulfur are wrong. It's just oxygen and hydrogen going out the top pipe, and then iron is placed in the same location always in the bottom.
Okay.
JoJo uses the bond or debond over output, which is the convenient way to do parallelism that we discussed before. And it looks sort of not too well thought out in terms of where the actual oxygen go per limonite. Each time it successfully puts everything onto the output, and that seems like what JoJo was saying in Discord, like, I just kind of crammed things into output and dealt with it in the third reactor. And when we get to the third reactor, we will see what that looks like.
Oh my. In some cases, he outputs 4 pieces of the input, and sometimes he puts output in 5 pieces. Very confusing to me. I hope you can explain Reactor 3 to me. Yeah, Reactor 3 is an amazing thing.
It's good to find an idiom that works for all possible limonite, which was probably the intention here. And this is not the bottleneck. It takes 22 or 23 cycles, depending on whether it has to do an extra output. And it does allow for a very simple reactor handling iron versus sulfur swap, but then the third reactor becomes a nightmare. Let's first look at the easier second reactor.
Okay.
This one is just swapping out an iron for...
Let's take a look at these, because that's interesting.
What's going on over there?
They're preloading some sulfur into the sulfur pipe and just letting the nickel sit aside because they need to have it run enough ahead to not cause any latency slowdown.
Oh, man.
That's the tactic that my solution, which is very similar to this, also did.
Meanwhile, red is waiting for the iron patiently.
Yeah, so the first iron isn't even arrived yet, and the sulfur is going to go out to the pipe so that those oxygens and hydrogens can get bonded in. And now blue just sits on the wall. Now, I can imagine it's possible to save cycles by having blue at least be an output hammer. But I didn't check. Really, I think they're limited by the processing speed of their third reactor anyway, so it might not make any difference.
Okay. Well, let's go take a look at that third reactor.
Yeah, so...
Oh, God. Can we start this from the beginning, or should we just pick it up where it's going?
Yeah, start from the beginning. It'll be easier.
From the beginning is at least somewhat helpful, but... So this reactor is sync locked, but it is not syncing before or after any output. It's syncing after the first atom of the output is in. So there's not really a good place to put pause and figure out the timings for this, but it looks like it's a 20 or a 25 or a 28 cycle loop. Which averages out to under 25, which means that the throughput is better than every 25 cycles and means that you can get under 1,000, which JoJo did. But there are 3 completely separate paths coming from the fact that there was not really any organization or symmetry considerations from the reactor 1 debonding path. This is the only reactor handling the divergence between the 3 types of limonite, and it does it with basically 3 totally different machines that happen to share some space.
In this case, red's the one doing the drop-off, and that was the type 3 limonite. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe so. The 3 paths, if you look where blue starts and then the hydrogen sensor that it hits on its 4th cycle. So if you follow blue's path down to that hydrogen sensor.
This hydrogen sensor.
Yes.
We'll
there
see
are 2 options where it goes left and 1 where it goes down. And then of the 2 options where it goes left, the other hydrogen sensor that it hits on the left path disambiguates that. So that's where the 3 branches happen. One of them goes around the bottom, which is completely independent.
I'm guessing that's the first one he implemented.
The other 2 go and share some path over next to the bonders.
Wow. And red dropped off the type 3 limonite. This is the type 2 limonite, and blue's dropping it off. And here we go. There's that.
I think red only drops off the type 3. So I think it goes 3 3 2 2 1. So we get to see Blue does its little
Correct.
jog there, which adds 5 cycles, but it doesn't slow it down because it's. But yeah,
Double
now you
pump.
get to see the type 1, where blue goes around the bottom and manages to carry it for a straight line without having to. So this is using all of the sensors. It's pathing over the bonders in 2 different paths for each Waldo. It's a complete chaos mess. But as the bottleneck reactor, it was at least optimized well enough to be better than 25 average throughput, which is really cool.
I found this solution to be the most confusing to analyze. I still don't get it.
And you can also see that the output on blue that is around that right path, if it goes down and around to the right, that output right there is completely synced with when red drops. So the fact that red drops only one of the 3 types of limonite and it gets the exact blue output is a pretty obvious candidate for that being output 40, and if you chase
Right.
it through, that is
Yeah.
output 40.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's all the latency savings from this that can be done without having
I think
a
this is
rework
that
of this
type.
reactor, which I don't think anyone
This
would
is
want to
that
do.
type. And drop output. Oh.
Yep, and that happens on number 40. And if you look at the pipes in the overworld, I'm pretty sure what I said about output hammering in reactor 2 is completely meaningless because sulfur always has a bit of a backup, and invar is out before sulfuric acid. So the only limiting piece is getting the oxygens debonded from the input and then putting them on the sulfur in time with the chaos reactor 3.
Right.
And that consideration is identical to the solution that I had, which is up next.
Okay.
I like that chaos reactor.
Yeah,
No,
breaking
this.
things up so that all the oxygen goes in one direction seems like it's a valid approach. It didn't work as nicely as I'd hoped, but it at least made the mental compartmentalization of the solution not as bad.
The way the Reactor 3 detects what the input type was based on the signature of the bits, the little itty bits that was chopped up into, is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, so it just depends on whether the hydrogen sticks out to the right onto that lower sensor or to the left onto the upper sensor on the left. I think the 2 sensors along the top row are used for while you're already processing and not for detecting which initial branch to take. But it's genuinely a lot to try to take in. It even has 1 extra in alpha on red, or blue handles in an alpha if not.
Right.
Yeah, this reactor is like only possible because of all these sensors. So this is what happens when you give SpaceChem engineers too much to work with.
Yeah, they're
Too
allowed
much,
to cram everything into output and make it work.
they can create this,
Yeah.
and they can make it work. Yeah.
Yeah, they can create monstrosities like this.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean,
It's pretty good feat of engineering here.
Yeah,
All
I
things
mean,
considered.
I'm sure that Biggie Mac will find a use for it in one of his record-setting slow solutions that he might be doing in the future or something.
Okay.
So, reference to what you tried to do for the test round this year.
Yeah, whenever there's randomness, you can sense your way to a pessimal solution.
Okay, well, let's go let this run to completion, JoJo. JoJo gets under 1,000, which was his name of the solution, 979 cycles, a score of 6.595, a little better than half a point better than the predecessor. And yeah, that was a great solution. In 10th place is Biggie Mac's solution, and Biggie's here to explain it to us. Go ahead, Biggie.
Yep, so mine is also like JoJo's, separating into oxygen in the top pipe and iron in the bottom pipe. But it does so with initial debonding over the input zone, which is probably the biggest flaw in this solution. It is slowed down by the first reactor needing both red and blue to carry it over, even though it allows it to be very deterministic in where it's actually putting the oxygens. It uses a rotate bounce sensor to always place oxygen in the same location, with the only variance being whether hydrogen is to its left, right, or absent entirely.
Okay.
And there's an extra path that blue takes along the top on the 5th input, which is the first type. So we gotta wait for one more, I believe, to see it take it. Yeah, on this input, that's just now handled by red. Red will have an oxygen sitting over the sensor when blue goes over this tile and cause blue to go up the top, which does save 1 rotation because it gets to perform it without having to bounce off of the sensor. So
Oh.
that makes this into 23, 23, 25 for those three input types.
And what's this hydrogen sensor doing there?
Oh, because there's only one debonder pair on the input zone, it might move the input iron one tile before it's fully debonded. So for this type of limonite that red just handled, it didn't move it. And blue needs to go grab. But for all the other types, it actually moves it because there's still one bond remaining to the left of that. So all the others, the iron that blue is going to grab is directly up.
It looked like there was the type 2. Here, we'll get there in a second. No, we'll get there in a second, I said. This one. It looks like blue takes that path even though it doesn't need to. Am I right?
No, it goes straight up. Oh, it does. That's something I didn't know about my own solution. But yeah, it doesn't need to. That might be a saving of a few cycles if I eliminate that mistake.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, you were on the right side of the 2-cycle gap, so.
Yeah. It's still going to be 23, 23, 25.
Okay, let's go take a look at your... Oh, here's something. Let's go take a look at
just like
initialize.
JoJo's, mine has one sulfur delivered to the pipe before any iron is processed. But I am able to then just output hammer with that Waldo, which is, I believe, pretty elegant. It still is. This reactor is underloaded, as Brookie mentions. Like, you are not going to be as fast as possible if one of your reactors has such a low utilization. But for the tasks that I compartmentalize this problem into, this is a very simple, efficient way of doing this. And it's a 23 cycle loop, so it's never going to slow down reactor 1.
Okay. Well, it's simple enough.
And then, unlike JoJo, the way that I have the oxygens be very standardized makes this very easy to do. This is a double pump, rotate, bond it all, go ahead.
Yep. And the hydrogens don't get in the way?
The hydrogens happen to work out just because of the order that things are dropped and output in. There's never going to be a collision because it's 1-to-1 input to output.
Okay.
There is the sensor on the roof that it's hammering onto to determine when to make that second bond. Right here, red is hammering on it.
Oh.
So when it's on its last bond, it needs to double bond it in case that's an oxygen that needs a double bond.
And presumably that also prevents collisions between the loops.
There are 2 bond pluses because there is a staggered timing sometimes, but there's only 2 bond pluses on blue because if there is a staggered timing, it detects it and it bounces to the right, which it doesn't do for the first time until number 29. But that little jog that blue has to the outer mega hits 3 times
just
solution.
You really didn't want to use sinks.
Yeah.
Really didn't what?
I said you really didn't want to use sinks.
Nope, no sinks. Sinks are illegal.
Yeah.
I did try moving this oxygen sensor off to the left, and it didn't help cycle count. I was really surprised by that.
It's still bottlenecked by the first reactor, and this is optimum latency given that the first reactor is doing what it's doing. So I just symbol optimized it from there to try to make the tiebreaker, which didn't matter.
Well,
yeah, it's probably way down the inputs anyway if you move it to the left.
If we fast forward until we're on output, I think 29 or maybe. I know it hits on 40, which is the one that matters. But blue's little jog over to Outer Mega saves 1 cycle on 3 of the outputs that happen, one of which is output 40.
Do you want me to place a pause?
Nah.
Okay.
We'll trust that you didn't just throw 4 symbols away.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I do think about cleanliness before I think about better approaches, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's usually pretty reasonable. Cleanliness leads to easier optimization, and then you can do the crazy tricks to make it speed up.
Here we go.
And blue is now aware that that it had to jog once. So a hydrogen sensor over the output there tells blue that it can advance that output by 1 cycle. And it slows itself down enough that it doesn't do it often anymore. So even though it was running ahead now, it slowed itself down until it's not running ahead. It worked out.
Wow. It's really subtle.
Yeah, it was 978 without it, which would have been an even closer margin of victory over JoJo, but I didn't know that when I was programming it.
Which of these sensors is the one that cares about the hydrogen?
It's the lower right one.
Why did you put the other 2 there?
I made all the
reactors
and all the reactors symmetric. It's symmetric 180 degrees. You can look at the other 2 reactors too.
Right.
Just for artistic reasons, made a 180 symmetry for the sensors. It always. I mean, I never used more than 2 of them.
If only you had done the same with the Waldos. That would be impressive.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Okay. And let's go
I went
to.
for something that I felt was simple, and it
Oh.
worked out well enough to get me 7,000 in top 10.
We're almost at the 40th output, so let's just see. Oh, here it is.
I wonder if it is possible to make symmetrical.
And
One of
output,
these
1
symmetrical
cycle.
reactors.
Nice. Okay. That gives Biggie a cycle count of 977, a score of 6.724, or a tiny margin of 0.129 better. Let's go take a look. Biggie has a metric of 977. Poor JoJo had a metric of 979. Just 2 metric points
And it was the
different.
bubble of the top 10 too.
Yep. That gives Biggie the 10th place. Nice job, Biggie. That's really interesting. In 9th place, we have McCrush, and let's go take a look at his solution.
All right, so we might have noticed that no one's really getting to throughput speed here. So McCrush looked at this and said, you know what, I'm not getting to throughput speed anyway. Why do I even need this extra complexity? So he threw away the first input, which is the most complex of them, arguably. And that's what that pipe's for. So let's take a look at Reactor 1. So when, in most cases, he chops it in half, I believe, and makes Fe, iron dioxide, as a lot of others do, though one of them is flipped over, which will need to be fixed in some later reactors. But yeah, the handling of he only has to handle 2 inputs here, so that makes things a bit easier on him. And it's double pumped, which will mean that even though the loops look a bit large here, it's reasonably fast.
Uh-oh.
And there goes the third input.
I do not like you. Bye-bye.
And yeah, that's about it. Just cuts it in half and then tries to, as best as possible, put them in the same location. There's just that one that has the iron in the top right instead of the bottom left. So let's look at Reactor 2.
The sensor here.
Yeah, that's the only sensor needed. Sorry.
Oh, wait, no, there's wrong. There's an iron in here.
Yeah.
Okay. When does that get used?
The hydrogen's for detecting the third input, and the other one's for... I think the other one's not used in the top left and the bottom left.
Here it is.
So he only uses 2 sensors.
Okay. Well, let's go take a look. Oh, there's our backup. Rejects. Here you go. Reactor number 2.
Okay. And Reactor 2, so this one is standardizing the locations of the irons and then debonding everything. So you'll see a bit of a song and dance here to get always have the irons, like the first iron be outputted in the top right and the second iron be output in the top left, or vice versa. With the exception of, no, yeah, that's correct. Okay. So then now there's hydrogen agnosticity, but the important thing is that the auctions are in the top left and bottom right corners of that square, and the irons in the top right and bottom left corners. So finally, Reactor 3 can be
consecutively, right?
What was that, Piggy?
Yes, it's also important to have them be outputted in the right order. So there's a bit of juggling to do that, I believe.
There's this grab drop, perfect handoff, I believe.
It's auctions first and then irons, I think. But yeah, as long as they're consecutive. And let's look at Reactor 3 then. So this one, now that all the cleanup has been done, red is dedicated to picking up the sulfuric acid and building it, and blue just gets the extra irons out of the way. Red has to drop a nickel out of the way so that it can get the sulfur from the millerite.
Okay.
And there's also a bit of the bottom input gets inputted a bit early sometimes, just for convenience's sake, I suppose.
Do we want to watch that initialization code, or is that just boring?
That's fine. Though I will note that you probably could have just, or you certainly could have just bounced that red Waldo back directly on the arrow. You could have saved one arrow there on the initialization.
Good point.
Yeah, instead of going to the right and then down, just go straight down.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's just the Reactor 3's job is actually relatively easy because of the fact that all of the inputs are arriving in a nice, tightly packed format, so you don't have to manually go and move single atoms around much.
It looks like Reactor 2 is the bottleneck. Is that it?
Yeah, I believe Reactor 2 is the bottleneck because it has to. Actually, Reactor 2 the bottleneck? I think it might have been Reactor
I
1.
think it's
actually.
Reactor 3 that's the bottleneck, because Reactor 2 does stall on outputs sometimes.
You're right.
Stalling on output is just
It's
because you're outputting more than one thing in a cycle. It'll
Yeah, I
show
think for the most part,
output
it's
before
I
the
think
second
it's.
side.
Yeah, I think it's very barely Reactor 1, but it's pretty close, I think.
Okay.
So it's reasonably balanced. I haven't closely measured the cycle counts of the first reactor, but.
Well, let's go watch it run to completion. Not much more. 955 cycles instead of 977 gives McCrush ninth place, and a score of 6.975 or 0.251 better than the predecessor. That would be Biggie. Nice job, McCrush. Next solution's by Flexo in 8th place. Let's go take a look at his solution.
Yeah, so I think Flexo has the last of the 2-2 ratio solutions, being 2 oxygens going to the invar processing and 2 going to the sulfuric acid. Flexo's first reactor is, as you can probably see, it's a double pump. These things are usually pretty easily seeable because you essentially have red and blue doing essentially the exact same things, which ends up kind of like red and blue are doubling over the same set of circuitry. Anyhow, other than that, you've got the iron and oxygens going into the invar output, and his solution is a little bit different than the others because he actually does it like 2 at a time, where instead of outputting like 2 molecules of just iron and oxygen, he has 1 molecule of 2 irons and 2 oxygens.
Most of them did iron dioxide. This one does di-iron quadroxide.
It's diiron dioxide.
And pay for the brackets.
Anyhow.
Let's go take a look at the next reactor. And here we are.
So this is the bottleneck reactor, I believe. Essentially, blue is bringing over all the stuff, and it's doing a big reshuffling of the atoms to get to invar and all the other outputs, which is sulfur and oxygen, which is given to the sulfuric acid reactor.
Now, what are these 2 oxygen sensor commands about?
I think that is for determining if it grabs onto an oxygen, because the 2 irons and 2 oxygens can be in 2 different conformations, and that's just to figure out. Like, for example, right here, when he drops, he won't grab an oxygen, so this doesn't trigger that oxygen sensor. So in that case, it will,
to move it out of the way.
Yeah, it shifts the thing. It shifts the oxygen over.
So he grabs it and he circles back to the same spot. He just has to move it out of the way so that it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's watch the lower one trigger here.
Very intricate of that invar piece.
Nice. Okay. Reactor 2, let's take a look at Reactor 3. I can see Reactor 3's got a build up.
Yeah, so Reactor 3 is your typical take, it's a double pumped, take an input and just start bonding all your oxygens to it. It's a double pumped reactor, and each Waldo is doing 2 rotates so that it covers essentially all the 4 orientations.
And it doesn't have to pick up any pieces because everything's bonded together that gets inputted, which is nice. So it's one Waldo can carry the entire thing by itself and just use deep bonds and bonds to attach and detach things.
Nice.
Nothing has to be manually moved onto the bonder pads or anything like that.
There's no sensor use here, so he has them all along the bottom saying nothing. Okay.
So it looks like, which is the actual bottleneck here? Because this one is waiting for Reactor 2, I think. I think it's Reactor 2's
Oh.
bottleneck.
Reactor 2.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm right.
The other backup is just because there's Reactor 2 is much slower than the hydroxides, I guess.
Okay. That's good to know. Look, how could Reactor 2 have been made better? Well,
It's a bit hard to
exercise
say.
to the viewer.
Maybe if
Okay.
Reactor 1 had given a more standardized output, I should say,
Okay.
then Reactor 2 might not have had to deal with it so carefully.
Fair enough. And here's 40 invar pieces and 40 sulfuric acids at cycle 932, giving Flexo a score of 7.239, or a jump of 0.264 improvement over the predecessor, in 8th place. Next solutions by Dariush in 7th place. Let's go take a look at it.
Yeah, so Dariush is our lowest symbol count solution, so I think maybe also the simplest. And takes the same approach that JoJo and I did of putting all the iron into one pipe and all of the oxygen into the other. There's somewhat of a promise being made between the output orders and orientations that it'll be 2 oxygen each in the 2 positions shown as oxygen in the annotation. Meanwhile, the hydrogens, there is basically no promise being made. Any of those 5 hydrogen locations are on the table, and the solution will work regardless. There's a bit of sensing. You can see that red sometimes has to reorient its oxygen. But for the most part, this first loop is very efficient, and it runs in 20 or 23 or 22, depending on the input type, which is fast enough to get a sub 900 score.
And it's worth knowing that the hydroxides are already bonded before they leave. It's just that I believe the reactor notes couldn't show all the bonds because of the bond limit on oxygen.
Yes, that is very true.
Okay. Let's take a look at reactor number 2.
So yeah, similar to JoJo's and mine, Reactor 2 becomes very simple because its only job is to process the invar and drop off the sulfur on its own.
Rectangles, blessed rectangles.
Yes, rectangles instead of hammering, though, where JoJo and I both had one Waldo carrying all the stuff and the other Waldo just doing pre-init. Dariush has the sulfur carried out first before any oxygen or any iron entered the reactor, which allows the same latency savings without needing a special initialization case. So once again, reducing the complexity and being the reason that he can get only 93 symbols.
Double pumped and still 93 symbols, or is this
It's
not double pumped?
necessarily double pumped. They're each serving a separate purpose. Blue is the one
Correct.
that is outputting sulfur, red's the one outputting invar. But yeah, it's Waldo path efficient because they're both optimally using the entire Waldo path.
Okay. Let's take a look at reactor number 3.
Optimize that Waldo path.
Reactor 3 is very similar to my Reactor 3 in that it's taking the sulfur and bonding on the hydroxides, but it's taking 2 per bond attempt, which is nice because then you only have to follow a separate branch once, and it can be a flip-flop instead of a sensor, and you get to see the sensors are all unused in this reactor up in the top right. So yeah, the first
there's a double bond.
pair are made, the rotate is done twice, and then the second pair is made. And there's a sync made so that blue is able to make sure that it performs the bond in unison with red performing the bond so that there's never any doubling back and rebonding. And then blue carries it off to output while red waits for a new sulfur.
Nice.
Pretty nice and compact.
Okay.
There is the bottleneck reactor in this one is still reactor 1.
Right.
Hmm.
So it's that's not a double pump, is it? It's just a handoff.
Nah, it's just
So
split
it's
work.
what 20-ish cycles.
Yeah, I think he named his solution with the timings per input. It was 20, 23, 22.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's entirely due to the sense paths on this first reactor. Everything downstream of it works in the same time no matter what comes in.
Yeah, no sensors. And no sensors.
So this is, to me, the cleanest realization of the approach I took, where all the oxygen goes straight to reactor 3 and doesn't get carried by any of the intermediate walls in the early reactor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having to shuffle inputs just to move them to the next reactor is always going to cost a lot.
And I initially viewed that as like a damning reason not to put anything through reactor 2 other than iron and then try to get the invar out. But we'll see. This is the last solution to take this approach of all the oxygen goes straight to reactor 3, and there's clearly much better. There's 6 solutions better than this. Which,
Yeah, because it puts so much load on reactor 1, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Having to get everything into one output.
Okay. Let's go watch this run to completion. 899 cycles for Dariush in 7th place, with a score of 7.579, an improvement of 0.340 score, which is a nice jump. Very good, Dariush. Next solutions by Team Lazy and Logggy. That's Lazy Comment and Gigi Gall. Here we go. Let's go take a look at it.
So first thing I want to quickly note, this solution is a big jump down in metric compared to the previous one. I think the previous one was almost
899.
900, yeah, almost 900, and we've just taken a big leap down by 134. So there's a really big jump, and similarly, the score is 1.2 better. That's also a pretty big jump. Anyhow, with that in mind, let's take a look at what Lazy and Logggy did. Oh boy!
Oh my gosh, they're just restructuring it.
So the first reactor is kind of a big mess.
Oh my gosh.
There's tons of sensor use, and what's particularly interesting is they actually do restructure this.
They leave the output or input 3 completely alone.
They leave input 3 completely alone because that's what they use to process the that's actually how they process the other outputs. Input 2 is restructured so that it has a space between the two irons. That's especially useful for making invar, as you'll see later. And watch this for the first input. Are you ready for this? They literally remake the third input from the first input. That is the exact same molecule as the third input, which is just...
Yeah, that seems to be their philosophy here, is they're like, all right, how do we speed up reactor 1? Well, let's just do nothing to one of the cases and make all the others create that case. So these are all standardized apart from hydroxides.
Yeah. If you take a look at the annotation, it's actually the specific bonding between the iron and the oxygens is exactly the same between the two. That is what they are using and I guess abusing in their solution. It's so with that they've removed all ambiguity with regards to the oxygen iron bonds. So yeah, it's another
and in the third
isomorphism.
It's like a 13 loop or something stupid.
Yeah. While the
very
Limonite 3 gets processed really quickly, but the other ones they do lose quite a bit of time, unfortunately.
But it's still got to be amortized, probably less than 20, right? Maybe?
Yeah, it has to be because 20 cycles times 40 is going to be 800. So this is definitely working faster than 20 cycles on average.
Just thanks to that one really fast case.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go take a look at reactor number 2.
Oh my god.
Right.
They went for it.
Yeah, so this is the reactor where you kind of see the whole glory of the thing playing out.
I always considered that you could just do the nickel first and then drop off the irons, but I never actually tried it.
Yeah, so why reconfigure the input? Because this way you guarantee that both of the irons are right beside an open spot. And
right, the irons are already in the right position.
Yeah, exactly. That allows you to make the invar with a single bond. But unfortunately, this does mean that you have a lot of work to do in Reactor 3.
Is he hammering D-bond in Reactor 3? Or are they hammering D-bond in Reactor 3? Or
We'll
no, that wouldn't be fast enough. They need 2 Waldos for this much work.
So it's actually really clever.
You want to put that back from the start? Or actually, there's one.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of timing stuff at the beginning.
Just to optimize the 40th output, probably.
I would say probably the first output if this is on a really tight loop.
Oh, the first, the grab.
Yeah, so I think this is like a technique that I saw GG Gall do in electroplating in 2018. Rotate and then bond minus and then rotate. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing.
Just grab everything off of each one in turn.
Yeah, in 2017, GG Gold got the first place solution for electroplating because of a very similar order of operations, where he essentially folded a huge stick of what was it, silver around a box. Yeah, and this is doing very similar with the 2 rotate commands and the other Waldo just doing the bond pluses and bond minuses as
it's just like reshaped into something more convenient to get the auctions out of the way and then put them back.
And that double bond on the nickel too is reused in that when you debond that, it's your finished invar.
That's fine. Yeah. I mean, it was probably deliberately added in the previous reactor just so that this would work out.
Exactly.
I'm guessing I didn't need that in the previous
It's a pretty
reactor.
beautiful solution.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I love the way he makes this big molecule that just has the invar placed in the middle.
The 3rd reactor has to be the bottleneck here, right?
I believe this is an 18 cycle loop.
Oh.
I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think there's a bottleneck at all.
Oh, yeah, that means the first reactor's the bottleneck then. I mean, kind of.
Oh.
Well, they might all be perfectly balanced, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's either that or it's the first reactor, but yeah, that's pretty cool that they got the 3rd reactor that fast with so much debonding to do.
Okay.
And using the disassemble over the output zone idiom, of course.
Of course.
And
More like a motif than anything but.
A big jump. This gives Team Lazy and Logggy 6th place with 765 cycles, a score of 8.797, jump of 1.219. Let's take a look at that metric jump one more time. 765 versus 899. Wow. Really nice job, Lazy and Logggy, which is Lazy Comment and GG Gall. In 5th place, we have Team Stockholm Syndrome, which is Brookie here and Anime. And Brookie's going to explain it. Let's go.
Yeah. So this solution is actually, by the way, it's actually very similar to the first place solution, but that is we'll get to that. Essentially, what the first reactor does is, instead of splitting my oxygens in like a 2-to-2 ratio, actually go for something a little bit different, which is I split it to a 3-to-1 ratio. Why 3-to-1? Well, 2 reasons. One is that if I have the same, like as you can see, like this almost trident or arrowhead shaped bonder, and
it's just one. They can all go in one go onto the sulfur.
Yeah, so essentially you're able to just move a sulfur in, hit bond plus 2 of them at the same time, and you already have 3 oxygens bonded already. And also I felt that this is probably the best way to balance between the reactors, because then reactor 2 can just all it has to do is it has one free iron input, and then it just needs to debond a single oxygen to output into the sulfuric
That's
acid.
sulfur output, yeah, or whatever it may be.
Nice.
One thing to
Go ahead.
note. So there's a lot of sensors in here. That's all to. Blue is doing pretty much. It's doing mostly the same thing. The only thing that is different is the only thing that Blue is doing differently is rotating different ways depending on specifically which limonite input gets inputted. That's just to deposit it in a way that makes it easy for red to handle the rest.
But red's hydrogen sensors are unreadable.
Yeah, those are actually Anningmay's improvement. Actually, he saved a bunch of symbols in this reactor with those sensors, but essentially red is doing all the special casing for specifically what to do with all the with the rest of the input. For example, the Limonite 3 is the simplest one because blue has a direct free path and red just needs to grab that, rotate, and drop. But for the other ones, red will need to grab it at a different point, and sometimes what results, for example, right here, it needs to rotate and then debond like that to get the 3 oxygens at the correct formation. This specific one, Limonite 1, actually doesn't have all 3 in different bonder areas, and that's actually fixed in the 3rd reactor. We'll get to that.
Okay, let's first take a look at reactor number 2. Here we go.
Right, so this is a double pumped reactor, and all it's doing is making the invar in a line, and then getting rid of the sulfur, and then moving the oxygen over. That is all this is doing. Yeah, sometimes it's an OH coming through, sometimes it's just oxygen.
Here's an OH. Okay. Time for reactor 3.
Right, so reactor 3 actually ends up being really simple, because of the aforementioned, you can just, grab input and then just do 3 oxygens at the same time. There are some times, however, that remember how the
oxygen came in the spot.
Or the first input actually, Limonite 1 will actually cause a collision because 2 of the oxygens are in the same place. Well, if it's Limonite 1, there's actually an extra hydrogen that sticks out specifically, uniquely to Limonite 1. And blue actually will, right here, move the colliding OH over so it doesn't collide.
That's convenient. So because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to sense it because it's on the bonder pads.
Right.
Nice. When does this one trigger?
On Limonite 1. In fact, it's red has the input alpha, and red will actually input before blue senses. You might notice that sometimes red actually stalls on the input alpha. I'm not entirely sure why that is actually, and it's kind of a minor miracle that doesn't ever happen when on a Limonite 1 where blue has to divert.
There's no sync,
there's no sync. It's blue is doing input alpha, and blue actually hits that input alpha before red hits its input alpha.
Otherwise, red would have stolen it.
Yeah. So sometimes red will pause on that input alpha, and I'm not entirely sure why it doesn't crash. I think it might be because of specifically the loop lengths are slightly different in the first reactor, that it doesn't crash, but I'm not actually entirely certain.
And blue stalls on in beta long enough usually.
I don't know. It's a little bit of a minor miracle that it's not crashing, but
debugging multiple reactors is difficult.
I ran it, it worked, so I left it alone. I don't really understand why it works.
Here's our 40th output coming out, and there we are. Um, Stockholm Syndrome gets a score of 694, a metric rather, 694, or a score of 9.671, almost a full point improvement. Let's take a look at those metric difference, 694 versus
765.
765.
Right.
This vest is pretty convenient, actually.
So from in two places, we just jumped down 200 cycles, which is kind of a big jump. But
Sure.
just wait until you see the top solutions.
Wow.
100 or 70.
Yeah, it's 694 to 899, right? Two
Right.
solutions and
Right.
205.
But as in, yeah, there's a big gap there, and
Right.
all the solutions are for that. Yeah.
Let us go see the next solution. Next solutions by Team 87 in 4th place. Let's go take a look at their solution.
All right. So the approach they've taken here is that they're going to be cutting this into iron trioxide and iron with an oxide, as the previous approach did. And this is going to be an approach that we see in some of the future solutions too. But they found a pretty good loop for doing this, which is just to use that set of bonders to debond and find the one piece of iron and oxygen that's isolated in each case. So this is something like a 14. This reactor 1 is going to be the bottleneck. It's something like a 14, 15, or 16 cycle loop. And it does have one issue, which is that the top output is standardized. So it's got, apart from the hydrogen, it's got the same orientation sticking up every time. But the bottom one has the iron, the oxygen's on different sides. So the open side is on the left or the bottom, depending on which input it is. But that'll be fixed in a later reactor.
Okay.
So let's take a look at reactor 2. Here reactor 2 is actually pretty simple because of the fact that this all arrives in one block. You don't have to do a bunch of single atom handling. You just take it, debond it over the pad, and then drop. They actually do a nice pattern here, which is that you can drop the inputs directly in over the bonders, which saves some grabbing and dropping, and then reattach the iron on the side of it. This is actually very similar to what myself and Tough Thought did in our solutions reactor 2.
Now I notice they have a sensor on oxygen here. This is just to replace an arrow. They called it.
Yes. They were flexing on the fact that they could do this.
Right.
Yeah, this is in fact, they use all 4 sensors in all 3 reactors.
Just for the sake of it, just to enjoy the fact that they have 4 reactors or 4 sensors.
They say it's also because it's to practice for the next week.
Right. Sensor. So next week is a symbol optimization puzzle, and sensor symbols count for half. So replacing arrows with sensor symbols is going to be good for the next puzzle.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll see about that next week.
Let's go take a look at reactor 3.
Yeah. So reactor 3. So now. You'll note the invar piece wasn't done in the previous reactor, but it's made it very simple for this reactor to do it, because all it has to do is detach the nickel and iron and swap that with the oxygen, so that you see both mold is handling that at once. And this is, again, a similar layout to what we'll see later.
Okay.
That rotate that gets out of the way just in time for the oxygen, before the oxygen collides with it, is cute.
Okay.
I think the first reactor is the bottleneck on the solution. We can take a look at the pipes.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah, none of reactors 2 or 3.
Second
really
reactor is working in sync with. Oh, it's got a little bit of an input stall, but red is synkless and actually waits on the sensor for blue to pick things up. Yeah, it's got a tiny little bit of an input stall sometimes.
Yeah, so very slightly reactor 1's the bottleneck, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're almost done with this.
Yeah, this will be something like an amortized 15 cycle solution, 15 cycle throughput solution.
And 645 cycles for Team 87 with a score of 10.407 for an improvement of, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze, 7.736 improvement. Let's go take a look at that 645 versus 694.
You're gonna have to edit that sneeze in later.
Oh, I will.
You missed it.
Yeah, I did miss it. I thought I was going to sneeze. Anyhow, that's almost that's a 3/4 point improvement. For only 50 cycles? No, 40 cycles or so. Nice job, Team 87. In third place on the podium is Sir with this solution, and let's go take a look at it.
Yeah, so if you remember back to Lazy and Loggy's solution, Sir does something similar to that in concept, but has a different Reactor 1 that disassembles it a bit differently. You'll see what I mean by similar in concept later on.
It's also hard-coded that initialization loop on blue just to make the first input slightly faster, it looks like.
Yes.
The grab and rotates.
Yeah.
Which I suppose must help in some way with the later reactors.
Yep. So his first reactor essentially outputs a somewhat preprocessed iron oxygen hydrogen stick, and then it'll output oxygen, and iron in the triple bonder pattern as noted earlier.
So the question is, how is he going to turn this mess into something fast in the second reactor? I'm curious to see this.
We shall see.
Here's your second reactor, and it does appear to be a bottleneck. Maybe not.
Yeah, so the reason why I said it's somewhat similar to Lazy and Loggy solution is because he also goes with the make one gigantic molecule approach to the solution. Yeah. He has pretty much almost the finished output. He's got the invar stuck to the sulfur still, but he just needs to move that one oxygen over to the side, and that's done.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it is deterministic, so it's not as big of a mess as it appears.
Yeah, the only difference
is
very
carefully form the big stick in the right order. Yeah.
Okay. Time to look at reactor number 3.
So, as previously mentioned, chop off the invar, and then you just make the sulfuric acid.
So basically,
yeah, using a handoff, and then doing the rotates. That actually saves on symbols compared to a double pump.
Like
one has to imagine that he just.
This is a bond minus to get rid of that double bond and output.
Oh yeah.
It also gets rid. It's just beautiful moment right there.
I'm guessing that double bond was also deliberately added in the previous reactor so that it wouldn't accidentally fall off in this reactor.
Probably.
But one has to imagine that this solution came from not like planning what he wanted to arrive in reactors 2 and 3, but finding something that was fast for reactor 1 and then just handling it, like dealing with it. And maybe there were some minor adjustments made, but it just looks like there happened to be that pattern of dropping a bunch of stuff into one pipe that worked for all the cases reasonably quickly.
Mm-hmm. Let's see this. This is a 14 cycle loop.
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 plus the 2 rotates. Yeah, it's 14.
Yep.
And this look like 2 is the limiting reactor here.
Yeah, very slightly, but it's pretty balanced.
Yeah.
This doesn't even fill the pipe up.
Which means
reactor 1 is slightly faster than 14.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this must also be 14, otherwise reactor 1 would be pipe or reactor 3
Yeah,
would
this
be
one's definitely a 14 cycle loop.
So yeah, I think Sir just looked at Reactor 1 and was like, all right, what's the shortest possible throughput I can find that outputs stuff that is standardized? And then just deal with that, even if the standardized doesn't look very good.
And there we are.
Yeah.
Sir titled his solution, Why No Sub 600? And I don't know why, because this is 600. I did take a look, foolishly.
He was probably trying desperately to save a cycle here.
I tried moving this reactor up one, and it just screws up with timing. These are highly sensitive machines.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was foolishness. I should never have tried.
That is funny that you can't move that reactor up and save time. Huh.
Yeah,
I guess it's the backup or something.
He's got these weird pipe formations here. I thought.
Yeah, like normally you'd move this entire array of reactors upwards so that they can move into the space in the top.
Right.
But I guess he needed the pipe space, or the timing was something. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyhow, Sir gets 600 cycles, a metric of 600, and a score of 11.181, very close to that perfect 12, but not quite there. An improvement of just over 3/4 of a point. 600 versus, I think it was 645. Indeed, it was. Really nice job, Sir. Third place. In second place is Team Zought, which is Zig here and Tough Thought, making a very formidable team. Let's go take a look at this solution.
All right. So Reactor 1 is a double pumped, somewhat looks like a mess, but the original core idea we started with for our Reactor 1 prototype was pretty simple, which is that it just gets that oxygen and iron out as simply as it can, and then shoves the rest into a iron trioxide. Now, all this extra handling with the sensors you see on the right side is just because we were having bottleneck issues in our second and third reactors because the output was sometimes flipped over when we had the case number 1 of the inputs, because the most convenient way to output it was without flipping it over. But we found that Reactor 1 had enough room that there was enough time to flip over that case. Or sorry, it's case number 3.
Oh.
Yeah. So if we flip that over, then the oxygen iron becomes an iron oxygen, and it gets output in the correct orientation. So that means reactors 2 and 3 didn't have to handle that.
So
or reactor 3 didn't have to handle that, yeah.
There's our input. And okay.
Yeah, so it handles all of them the same, just blindly doing a double D-bond, and that outputs a iron oxide pair.
And what's this oxygen sensor about?
So this one is because the other issue that we had was that we were sending out a hydrogen in the top left corner sometimes. So this one wasn't hydroxide agnostic, how we were implementing our later reactors, because we found that one hydrogen was getting in the way. So what we did was, in one of the cases, it doesn't attach to the hydroxide right away, flips over and goes to the underside of it to get it. And that means that the output is standardized to not just have... or the main point is that the output is now the same shape, no matter what, even if the bonds are a bit different. And that's pretty important because it means that you can count on grabbing things in the later reactors without having to worry about whether it's actually there.
I notice you have a double bond in this one and no double bond. I guess you can't.
That one, I think that there's a reason for that, yes.
We're going to find out.
What it is.
Now let's see if we can figure it out.
Or I think it was just not easy to add it in the first reactor, and the second reactor was capable of doing it. So yeah, here looks very similar to the previous solution we showed that had a reactor 2 like this, where it just attaches the millerite in place after leaving the oxygens all on that surrounding that input, and then attaches to the side. So this is a 13 cycle loop, and we had to do a lot of jiggering of reactor 1 to enable the input to be precise enough to let this be 13 cycles.
Okay.
And I believe, the double bond gets added there in the case that is missing the double bond.
Now, let's just start over. Take a look at the perfect time.
Oh yeah, the initialization. So this
Yeah.
was just to save the last cycle, or 2 cycles. We had to time the. To be honest, Tough Thought understands this better than I did. He did this last optimization, which is that otherwise the output timing for the last 40th output will be off by a bit if the pipe backs up and makes it stall in input, I think. So it's
Yeah.
timed exactly so that the pipe won't back up, I think.
Yeah, we're going to see that in the... Go ahead, Brookie.
Yeah, that's actually... Zig got it right. Essentially, there's a...
I hope I understand.
Yeah, the third reactor waits until the second reactor has outputted a decent amount into its pipe, because the third reactor actually works on a
Yeah, the third reactor
loop.
is a 12 cycle loop. It just worked out that way.
Yeah. The third reactor is on a 12 cycle loop, but the second reactor is on a 13 cycle loop. So he had to build up a bunch of had to build up some molecules pre-assembly before it actually goes. And
yeah. Third reactor is too fast for its own good.
Yeah, third reactor ended up too fast. It was at 14, but then once we improved the second reactor, the output just happened to be in a nice enough position that you can see what the third reactor is doing here.
Well,
pretty simple.
Let's go take a look at how long it takes for the third reactor to begin taking.
Yeah, very long stall.
A little more. Oh, a little more. Not quite done yet. Oh, here it goes. And it's ready.
And that's just to wrap around to the sink.
Oh, that's right.
And then at times the red input's just at the right time.
Now let's take a look at that pipe. That pipe already has...
It's the top pipe, I think.
Oh.
Actually, I forget.
No, I think it's this one. The pipe from 2.
One.
Yep.
Yeah.
It had 4 until it got that input. It gave Reactor 3 a good bit of material to work with. So let's go watch it work with it.
So yeah, you can see it just disassemble in the output zone is the idea, and everything just kind of works out because of the shape or the orientation that everything was inputted in. They just don't need to move out of their way or do any rotates or anything.
Yeah. This is beautiful. Sometimes SpaceChem looks so easy.
Yeah, I mean, so this is hiding a lot of work that went into fixing the first reactor.
Right.
I think my initial prototype had various problems with how chaotic the outputs were, and so the second and third reactors were bottlenecked at 15 or something.
I wish.
And,
I wish I could see the process of coming to this solution. Some of these top solutions, you just see them. And
I could send you some of the earlier versions. Like the first reactor was very simple, the first iteration, which is just doing blind double debond and drop whatever it has.
I'd really enjoy that. We'll talk later.
Sure.
Okay, well, let's see how many cycles this thing has. And, oh gosh, it goes so fast.
You can see that pipe between reactors 2 and 3 start to go empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also worth knowing that the reactor 1 can afford to do all these like special casings because it's double pumped. And whenever you have something that's double pumped, if you increase the total loop size by 4, that only increases the throughput by 2. Throughput by 2 for that case.
Yeah.
So it's actually not too bad to do special casing if you can afford to double pump it.
And here's this pipe getting dangerously close to being empty.
Yeah.
And there it goes.
We actually, normally you'd move that reactor upwards, the last one, but we couldn't because the pipe had to be long enough.
And that gives Team Zought a cycle count of 575, or a score of 11.708, so close to that perfect 12. Improvement of 0.527, over half a point. Let's just see that 575 versus 600, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth knowing the 600 was at exactly 1.5 input speed, which is neat. Or so, something like that, theoretically.
That's second place, and that was really good. Nice job, but who got first place? Let's go see in a moment. In first place, we have Andy. Andy has this solution. We're going to take a look at it right now.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that Andy's solution is similar to mine. And while you might not it might not seem like it at first, I'll just quickly say this. It actually is. By that I mean
I called it.
he does the same. He does the same
Yeah.
concept of outputting 3 of the oxygens.
3 auctions out.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry, you're saying the 3 auctions at the top, is that right?
Yes. He
Okay.
he outputs 3 oxygens into the sulfuric acid reactor, and 1 iron and 1 oxygen into the invar reactor. So in terms of the reason why I think both him and my team chose to do this was doing this actually loads the reactor really well. And Andy's improvement is actually primarily his first reactor. If you can understand Andy's first reactor, the rest is essentially identical to Stockholm Syndrome's solution. So
yeah,
Stockholm Syndrome
was yours
has...
double pumped, or it was handoff?
No,
more?
we had a single actually. It wasn't even a handoff. It was a 17 cycle loop and 15 on one of the outputs. We were thinking about trying to do double pumped, but the problem was, well, number one, we didn't really have the time to explore that design space.
It was hard to prototype the reactor ones in this puzzle.
Yes,
like they were the biggest time sinks.
One of the biggest problems with double pumping is you need to somehow get 2 irons into the omega output. Andy's solution does a beautiful thing by bonding onto that iron and pushing it down into the omega. Yeah. So this actually saves way more cycles than you'd expect. Why? Because otherwise you have to go and drop the iron and then double back to go get the other iron and then get that into the output zone. If you just bond plus and then bond minus output, then this is way faster than having to grab drop output and then go back up, grab drop, and then do another output and then go back.
And you can see on the support side, the other Waldo is just choosing not to output it at the right time, right? If it's an iron.
Kind of.
Because sometimes it has to debond the first auction, and sometimes that first thing's drop is...
Yeah, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's actually a little bit weird because 2 of the 3... Yeah, so 2 of the 3... 2 of the 3 inputs will have the oxygen right below the grabbed iron, and what that will do is it'll allow them to just like do that like two cycles earlier or a cycle earlier. When it's the third input though, there's actually like a little bit of like a delay, and it's fixed differently in blue and red. Red takes an extra detour from the hydrogen sensor on top of the loop, while blue does a little thing where it will move up from the oxygen sensor output and then go back down. Yeah.
And these 3-4 sensor commands, what are they about?
Yeah, I just mentioned that.
Okay, excuse me.
Supporting the different cases of debonding and outputting timings based on what case they're in, but the actual path that they follow is the same, which is the hard part.
The actual path is actually they essentially what Andy is really doing is he's actually checking every single possible area where the oxygens can be bonded.
So he just passes over everywhere.
Yeah, he just debonds every single possibility essentially.
Yeah, and then the other Waldo just like does the correct support command for that case.
Well,
so since I'm a salty bastard, I'll say that I suspected that this method would be the top solution, and I tried, but I could not find a good, fast way to do this first reactor. So we went with the way that we found that was quick, but resulted in irons going out both pipes, which is perhaps conceptually a bit worse.
Well, let's go start this one over again because we're already at cycle 491 and we haven't only looked at reactor 1. So
yeah,
let's go take a look.
Well, that's where the magic happens, really. But here it should be
so
to look at now.
As I said before, if you could understand Andy's first reactor, you will have pretty much no problems with the rest of the solution because it's essentially identical to Stockholm Syndrome's solution. The only difference is that instead of outputting a sulfur and then the oxygen, Andy finds a way
To not debond them?
to bond the sulfur onto the oxygen first.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so that when he outputs into the third reactor is actually a sulfur bonded to an oxygen already instead of two inputs and
Yeah, that might save on some
necessitating.
bottlenecking.
Yeah, it definitely saves on bottlenecking because in Stockholm Syndrome's solution, we had to double back. We had to double back over the beta input with the two different Wattos, and that definitely took time. And that's why also I don't think it was double pumpable for that reason.
So the takeaway here is whenever you see something weird in one of the reactors, like, oh, I have to do this awkward jog to deal with this thing, see if you can change the output of the previous reactor to fix it. Or if you're doing some special case to make the output really nice, maybe just give the next reactor something worse and see if this next reactor can deal with it and try and balance that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of intricacies between reactor inputs and outputs where you can do a lot of really fancy stuff, actually. That really isn't, I don't think, is explored to a huge extent, especially with custom reactors. I think there's definitely a lot of design space in that regards, and I'm definitely interested in seeing future puzzles explore that.
Okay, let's go take a look at reactor number 3.
Right. So this reactor is actually really simple. All it's doing is bonding the oxygens from reactor 1 to the sulfur oxygen from reactor 2. And the only special case here is I don't remember which limonite input it is, but there's one where the oxygen gets inputted on bonder number 4, and that's where the hydrogen gets sensed, and then blue will grab and move it upwards instead.
Here it is.
Yeah, so that input bond plus right there.
It's another 12 cycle loop in this one, I guess.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So this is a 12 cycle loop. Reactor 2, I believe, is also a 24 cycle loop. Let's see here. Might be 23.
Let's see. 16.
Yeah, I think it's
25?
23 or 25.
I'm getting 25, but I might be miscounting. Because you got the normal square, or the normal rectangle, which is 16, and then you add that 6 long loop plus 2 rotates, which is 24. What did I say? Oh, there's another rotate.
There's another. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, it's very fast. So it's 12.5 throughput.
Right, it's 12.5 throughput for this reactor. The actual throughput is 12.83 repeating.
Oh, wow.
The reason why is because his first reactor actually handles 2 of the inputs.
Faster for one of the Waldos?
It's the loop lengths in this are 25, 25, and 27. If you do the math, that ends up being like 25.6, and then you have to divide that by 2. And that's where the 0.83 comes from.
It's double pump plus, yeah.
Because the double pump divides things by 2.
Yep.
Wow.
That's cool.
Okay.
But double pumping is your friend, even with weird randomness.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's just very hard to find a layout that will actually allow you to.
And there we go. It's finished already. 565 cycles for Andy. That's, 10 cycles better than Team Zought. Just 10 cycles separates number 1 and number 2.
I think we probably won on latency and lost harder on throughput. Something like that.
That was 0.292 improvement for that 10 cycles. Nice job, Andy, for first place. Congratulations.
It's a machine.
Indeed.
So I think we have some bonus solutions too.
I think we do. The first non-scoring solution is by Gigs. It uses, yes, only one reactor, and let's go take a look at it. Oh God.
Yeah, so this is the first bonus solution, and why is this one notable? Well, technically, you're allowed 3 reactors, and there was no penalty for using more reactors than necessary. So, well, that means that everybody essentially went with as many reactors as they could. But if you look closely at the inputs are all balanced. Actually, they're balanced in exactly 1-to-1 ratio, which means, and because you only have 2 inputs and 2 outputs, you could theoretically solve this in 1 reactor.
Well, you
And
could do it
this
even if it
is
wasn't balanced, but yes, you do have to
yeah,
have few enough inputs.
yeah. So this is a 1
Oh my
reactor
God, what's going on?
solution. Yeah. So
Molecules just randomly moving around. What's going on?
yeah, this is where Gigs.
Or Waldo's.
Yeah, this is where Gig's solution gets a little bit difficult to understand.
Oh my God.
But long story short, what he's doing is he is taking.
He's slowly transferring oxygens from the iron to the sulfur, I think was what just happened.
Yes.
In a very roundabout manner.
Yeah, he is taking the input, stripping or cutting it in half first, and then he's stripping off the oxygens and OHs one by one around the iron. He's using a flip-flop counter to count to 4, so he's sure he's visited all 4 sides. And then
Is there a flip-flop counter? I thought it was these 4 sinks. He uses the nickel.
Yeah, I don't see any
as a placeholder. And then blue goes up.
And blue will sink 4 times.
Correct.
Yeah.
Blue has a 4 count, I guess, kind of.
Yeah, blue has 4 sinks.
And that counts the 4 sides of this iron.
Right. And while it's doing that, blue has dropped the nickel off on a sensor, and that tells red to keep doing its loop of detaching oxygens.
That's cute.
And nothing.
So yeah, red doesn't know what's going on until the nickel's removed.
Right. And it's going to handle the last oxygen. And blue's going to move the nickel away. And there's half of it done. So red knows to move that iron over and grab the second half.
Yep.
And meanwhile,
then red will sink for blue to do this all over again.
What's that D-bond string that blue is doing over there? I'm curious.
So
here they're gonna do more oxygen transferring. You can probably fast forward this. And yeah, I guess there's a lot of blind case handling by red to make sure that the hydroxides are in the right position and everything.
Yeah. Looks like that's handled in the initial handling of the millerite. So let's go take a look at the millerite come in.
Here. Oh, it's just...
Oh, it handles the...
the debonding of the piece. Yeah, you need 2 debonds there, and then 1 more for the nickel and sulfur.
Correct. Although this
Could
first one I didn't...
Together, but, So I think that one's because case A of the inputs has 2 bonds on the square. So you need 2 in a row to, for sure, cut everything in half there, and then 1 more on the millerite, which maybe could have been merged, but who knows. To have just 2 debond commands overall.
I love the shaking around right there to make the double bond if there's something to be bonded.
Yeah, I guess with single reactor solutions this complex, it's important to not have to rely on timing support, because otherwise you're going to run out of space on the other Waldo that's supporting it. You want basically 2 independent 1 Waldo solutions that are like each able to handle like half the job.
Well, you'll see. You'll see about that.
It depends,
which input is this one? Oh, let's this one go a little faster. Is, I want to see the type 1 case.
Impressive.
Right, so unfortunately this is the slowest solution.
You don't say.
Because red is doing so much
really, Gigs just needs to step up the SpaceChem game here. Slow solution.
here is the type 1 limonite. And you're right. No, this pawn minus doesn't appear to be doing anything.
I think the real problem with this is an inefficient use of splitting work between the reactors.
Oh,
Let's go.
okay, never mind. I thought it might have been for processing the other half, but then I realized that that's the only time it ever gets hit is right after the beta input. So I think that might actually be a superfluous symbol.
Uh-oh. Gigs is...
Oh, got him. Got him.
You can try deleting it and pressing 4 to see if it crashes or not.
Uh-oh, Gigs.
Oh!
Gigs.
Disqualified.
All
right, what's our next non-scroll?
Okay, let's just move on now. First of all, let's get the result screen. Gigs gave us a 1-reactor solution that ran at 17,656 cycles. That would have been interesting if it had been in the solution space, but it wasn't. It's a great extra solution, bonus solution. Thank you, Gigs. But wait. Yes, I said, but wait. There is more. Here's brookieoz's 1-reactor solution. Let's go take a look at it.
Yeah, so I hacked this together at the
unprimed flip-flop?
Actually, no, it's not.
No?
No, I don't actually count. I don't.
Yeah, I guess you can't really prime that easily, can you? Maybe.
I don't think there is a.
Hold on, I'm still following the loops.
Flip flop.
Oh yeah, because it's stuck inside sensor loops. Oh, I see.
Is this loop necessary?
Yes, it's necessary to avoid collisions. You'll see when Limonite 1 comes around. Also, you said that it was a better idea to have 2 Waldos essentially working independently. Well,
is that what you did?
There's only 4 sinks in this solution.
Oh wow.
Nice.
It's everything else is timing loops. Timing loops and sensor wall sensor stalls.
What's the story on that hydrogen sensor that is pointing right instead of pointing upwards?
That's actually
there a symbol save there?
necessary. No,
Alright.
that's not the symbol save. That's
I'm
actually
just
necessary.
trying to shark you.
That's actually kind of necessary because that hydrogen sensor is used specifically for the for Limonite 1.
Okay.
Okay, we're looking for that extra symbol. Let's go find it.
I'm telling you, it is not easy. It's not easy to find. So that's why I said I'd be very impressed if you could find the extra symbol.
Is it that weird blue loop that could maybe be a line bouncing back or something? I don't know.
No.
Okay. Well, let's go. Why don't we explain this solution before we take it apart?
Yeah. So essentially, this is the concept for this is actually pretty much the same to the other non-meme solutions, where you're essentially trying to come in and bond sulfur directly to like the centers of where the irons used to be. Because if you can position your irons over the bonders and remove the irons and then put the sulfurs back where it was, that already like gets you most of the way to finishing your sulfuric acid output, and that is by far the hardest output to make compared to invar. So the only difference is this crams the work of 3 reactors into 1. How? A whole bunch of special casing for red to decide exactly which oxygen to grab out of the inputs, so it can reuse this up and down loop to essentially debond the other to debond the rest of the stuff. So for example, right over here, red will go back and do this up and down right here. Blue is timed to debond so that red is holding on to 3 oxygens and a sulfur. Blue comes in to swoop away that last iron, and then red comes over and finishes the output. Unfortunately, the sinks are there because the first two sinks are there for red to delay, and the second sink is for red to actually wait until it can output. Because I ran out of space. Yeah, that's essentially what happened. I ran out of space.
Okay. Let's watch it run a little faster. But wow.
Yeah, I'll have to give up on finding the extra symbol.
Yeah, that extra symbol is actually really hard to find. It's actually a bond plus.
Okay, well let that be a clue.
Is
there a timing one that is at the same time on both Waldos?
Here's one bond
by
plus,
chance.
but that's not it. Here's another one. That's
it's
not
actually the blue bond plus beside the sink.
Okay.
Not that one, but the one on the bottom left.
Oh, far bottom left, yeah.
Yeah, it is not obvious because you expect it to be
like on the first column.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's watch it get hit.
The reason why it's not obvious is because you have input bond at the same time, right? And you're probably thinking, well, hold up a second. If I'm trying to make sulfuric acid, I will need to, bond twice to get that oxygen.
But it just happens to pass over it again later. Or something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I said this is not an easy symbol to figure out to save.
Here.
Right here. Because red hits that bond plus again.
Gotcha.
That bond plus is there for a different branch to because one of the other branches isn't able to get a second oxygen bonded.
Wow.
So yeah, that is the one superfluous symbol. If you could find that, props to you.
He is right. Bye-bye symbol.
Maybe you could pram it if you... Is there some way you could use a sensor on instead of an arrow there? Anyway. Alright.
Anyway.
That's a very nice solution, Brookie.
Yeah, it is.
It's funny that it came out to the exact same symbol count as the other one reactor.
Yeah. Actually, Giggs was talking to me before the tournament or before the time was up, and he asked me what my symbols for my one reactor solution was. I didn't tell him. We didn't exchange cycle counts, but but I was like, oh yeah, I'm at like more than 100, and he said he was at 99. I'm like, can I find some symbol saves? And I managed to find.
All right, so it wasn't a coincidence.
To be fair, while finding the symbol saves, I actually managed to speed up the solution. That primarily.
That's usually how that works, yeah.
Yeah, primarily it was blue's loop at the very bottom. Instead of doing a line and delay loops to get to the bond minus, originally red had a sink right at the bottom of that up and down loop, and blue had this really weird like loopy thingy going on that delayed for quite a while. So.
Okay, well let's run it to completion. One reactor, 2,106 cycles. This was a fun solution. Thank you, Brookie. And that ends our solutions. The only thing left to do is show the results, and here they are. For week 7, or processing, we have these results. In 10th place, we have Biggie Mac. Nice job, Biggie. 9th place is McCrush. 8th place was Flexo, and 7th place was Dariush. Team Lazy and Logggy, that's Lazy Comet and Gigi Gall in 6th place. Team Stockholm Syndrome with brookieoz and Anime got 5th place. Another team, Team 87, that's the French people with Giggs and Razoons in 4th place. Element 87 is Frankium, that's why they chose that name. 3rd place is Sir. Team Zought is Ziggs and Tough Thought in 2nd place. And in 1st place, or winning this week, was Andy. Here is the current standings after 7 rounds. Lazy Comet is in 10th place. Biggie Mac is in 9th. Gigi Gall in 8th. Dariush in number 7th place. And Giggs is in 6th. brookieoz here is in 5th place. Tough Thought in 4th and Resunes in 3rd. Sir is holding 2nd place, and Andy is our leader in the tournament with 1st place and a commanding lead of just over 4 points. This has been Biggie Mac, brookieoz, and Zig doing commentary, and I'm Rexkix. Thank you for watching. This has been SpaceChem Tournament 2020, the Round 7 results video. Looking forward to seeing you for another results video.
Yeah, thanks for doing the editing as always.
Oh,
Yep.
well, my pleasure.
Thank you very much for hosting all of us.
Oh, I couldn't be
We've
done
got
without
the
you.
cushy job of doing all of the commentary. So you're the one who's doing all the hard work, so.
Oh, I think otherwise. See you all for another results video. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Also 99 symbol as well.
In fact, there's also one extraneous symbol in the solution.
Oh my god, get him. I mean, I'm depending on how you find it. I'm
Get
sure that they have lots of
myself,
extraneous
okay.
symbols, but-
Yeah, well.
It's actually not obvious, the extra symbol in this one.
Challenge accepted. Open the reactor.
Yes, I said, but wait. Oh, hang on a second.
Good enough intro.